friends, it's Caroline, and I am back today with a full tutorial for this album that is the 6.5 by 6.5 album that is the first of 4 in a series. Yes, I'm going to begin a series today. Well, actually today is Wednesday. I'm going to be posting this tomorrow on Thursday, and I haven't even started filming it yet. Yeah, I know. I don't know what I'm thinking, but I have found that if I set deadlines for myself, I do better. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. But it's also afternoon, so I'm only getting like a half a day and then whatever hours I can steal at night in. So that's, yeah. I'm sure that a lot of you seasoned crafters have done tutorials in less time. I have not. So this is going to be an exercise in, you know, what can Caroline pull off here? Oh yeah. And then on top of it, I'm playing around with camera angles, as you can see. So there's that. But yeah, I am really excited to be bringing this to you guys today. This is the first of 4, like I mentioned, and I'm just going to run through the results of that poll that I put over on the community section of my YouTube channel page on the order that I go in them. And so the 6.5 by 6.5 one, and that's the one that we're going to begin with. This is my prototype that I had made, and so I'm going to do a quick little walkthrough of that for you. And it has a tie closure, as most of mine do, and mostly that's because I do the expandable hinge attachment. So I like to have the tie closure because it sort of keeps the pages in place, but I also like ribbon, and it's a great excuse to tie a bow. And so this was the first one that I made. I made a couple tweaks to it. I did change the size of the twist and pop here on the front page, but isn't this cute? And then we've got 2 little flaps on here that act as pages, and this is all part of page 1. And so then that opens, and then these have some magnetic closures on them. Make sure I'm staying in frame here. And it's a mirror image over here. And then this page here, we just have a flap up and a flap down. And I didn't put any pattern paper on this one. I just kept it with the gold. And then again, we've got the 2 pages or faux pages here. And then the back page. I just made just a little card, a nice little, you know, card back here to put some photos in or something like that. And then we've got a pull down waterfall, which I'm just so happy with the way the mechanism is working on it. I really like it. And I did go ahead and put a grommet and a small ribbon there on the bottom there. I also included some tags in these, and I did use the Heartfelt Creations tags and as album tags and accents. I think that's the name of it. I'll link that in the description notes below too so that you can find that. But aren't these cute? I thought they turned out really well. I love adding the grommets. I feel like it's just a nice finish. Plus it adds so much strength to them too. So this is the walkthrough of the prototype. And this one is the one we're gonna make today. It's super cute. It is a beach theme. This was the paper pad that I used for the prototype one, and this is the paper pad that I'm using for the tutorial. They're both Hot Buy paper pads from Michaels. They're both Recollections brand, and they both have 48 sheets. And one of the things that I'm adding to all of this, as if this weren't challenging enough, is I am going to try to make all 4 of the album sizes using not only just the 2 pieces of chipboard, but using up the entire paper pad for the making of all 4 of them. So theoretically it should work, right? We're cutting pieces that fit within the parameters of a 12 by 12 to begin with. So we should have those pieces, you know, the cutoffs for the 6.5 by 6.5 should be 5.5 by, you know, 5.5 by 12, and so we should be able to make that work. I don't know, I haven't done it yet, but that's one of the things that we're going to be working on. So let's do a quick walkthrough of this one. Also, I haven't finished this one yet, so there's that. Let's do a quick walkthrough of this one. The page design and layout is all the same, but it shows how different pattern papers, different collections can completely change the feel of a book. I did increase the size of the twist and pop over here. I really liked that a lot. And I think it's so pretty. And then over here, we've again got the 2 additional sort of faux pages on top of page 1. that gives us a lot of room. And then this one, I was so happy with the way this turned out. I took one of those large, you know, design sheets in the paper pack and laid it across there. And I think it looks really nice. Let you see the full effect here. I did have to do some paper piecing. So you know me, I pulled out those Love from Lizzie peel-offs and covered the seams. And then we've got over here, we've just got the flip up, the flip down. I went ahead and put the paper on this one, and then I liked how this sort of worked out. I did have to cut a section out of here because this isn't a full 12 inches, but I'm sure I'll use that on one of the other albums, right? I don't know, we'll see what happens, right? And then again, we've repeated the two sort of faux pages on top of the page 3. And then we've got the pocket page back here, which I've got some cut aparts that I'm gonna place onto some other cardstock here and put in there. And then we've got our pull down waterfall over here. And again, I just love the way this works. Isn't that just super cute? It's really fun. Each one of these pages I'm just leaving blank with the gold paper because I think it's really pretty. And when you go to put a photo on it, it's gonna act as a really nice frame on there. Each of these are 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. So you're easily gonna be able to place a 4 by 6 photo on here. And yeah, I think that's gonna look super, super, super cute. So haven't finished this one, starting the tutorial on the other one. This is crazy. I will have the full cutting guide available on my website for you. All right, I can't procrastinate any longer. It's time. Let's go ahead and do this. Okay, we're gonna start with cutting all of our pieces to cover our album, as well as to build the hinges and the pages and the flips and flaps that are gonna go in our album. I begin with a piece of paper with all of my measurements on it. I then take it over to my cutter and I begin cutting all of those pieces of paper. I will notate which pieces or pages those papers belong to using a sticky note and just stick those on there, and then I'm going to stack them up in reverse order and bring them over to my desk, and we're going to get started. The paper that I'm using to cover my album and build my pages with is this shimmer cardstock paper. Now, I have found that it works really well. It folds well, it covers well, it's a nice weight paper. I am going to be using 17 sheets of the 8.5 by 11 paper for this album construction. And even though that sounds like a lot of sheets, with it being 8.5 by 11, I still think it's a pretty economical way to do it. One of the things that I'm going to point out, though, is that this shimmer cardstock, and I don't know if it's just the metallic cardstock or if it's all of the shimmer cardstock, because I've only made one with the metallic paper so far. The shimmer cardstock actually leaves little bits of kind of metallic, I don't know, just, it's not glitter, but it's a little metallic residue. That's what we'll call it. And it leaves it on my surface only when I'm folding and burnishing. To the touch, nothing transfers. So I haven't had any issues there. And I do think that it's a really great cardstock, and it's just fun. I wanted to do something differently. But feel free to use whatever cardstock you want. The using of the 17 pieces of paper, that's in regards to if you're using 8.5 by 11 paper. If you're using 12 by 12 paper, I would assume you would use less, but I haven't done that. I haven't done the math on that yet. So I don't have that information, and I apologize for that, but you can certainly swap out whatever your favorite cardstock is for wrapping your albums and things like that. The other thing is that because I'm using 8.5 by 11 cardstock, and because I'm trying to be economical with it, there are some places that instead of doing a 1/2 inch flap where I'm going to attach one of the flip outs, I'm reduced it to 1/4 inch just because it fits within the parameter of the paper. So I have made a few adjustments like that. I will point them out when we get to them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting my cardstock. Now that I've got them in the order that I'm going to be using them, I'm going to take them over to my desk and stack them up over there. Now I'm back over to my desk, and we're going to start working on this stack. And the first thing we need to do is wrap our album. So I've got this stack here of the chipboard pieces from when we cut those 4 album cover sizes from the 2 pieces of chipboard. And this is for the 6.5 by 6.5 album. I'm going to wrap this using the lay flat method that was designed by Tamara Merrill, who is the owner of Country Craft Creations. And I will have a link to her video in the description notes below, as well as a link to my video that I show how I use her method in wrapping my albums, because I do a couple little things differently. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time on it, but I am going to go all the way through it because I have had some people asking some questions, and I know that I get a lot of benefit from seeing things more than once, not just in the same video. So I'm going to run through this and we're going to construct our album. Now, I use these spacers that I purchased at Country Craft Creations to help me to wrap my albums. You don't need to purchase them, but I do highly recommend them because if for no other reason, they're really brightly colored so you can find them on your desk. I had been using other spacers that I made, and this is, if you don't have these, you know, go ahead and make the album. All I did was cut pieces of chipboard that were, I cut 2 of them that were 1 inch by 12 inches, and I cut 1 of them that was 1.5 by 12 inches. And I marked them with a Sharpie, and those worked as my spacers for, oh my goodness, well over a year at least. And so if you want to go that route, you certainly can. There's nothing wrong with that. I like these. For one, they don't get bent or frayed or anything over time. They, you know, they last. But really the real benefit, which I didn't anticipate, is they're brightly colored so I can find them on my messy desk. I don't know what happened, but my camera wasn't recording, and I made the entire cover. Yep, front and back cover, did the whole thing, and it wasn't recording, and it's now almost 2:30. Yeah, so I'm still gonna shoot for getting this uploaded on Thursday. Let's see how this works. I'm gonna begin with 2 pieces of 6.5 by 6.5 medium weight chipboard, 1 piece that measures 6.5 by 1 inches, and that is gonna be for the spine. And then to wrap them, we're gonna have 2 pieces of our cardstock that measure 8.5 by 8.5. That is gonna be for the front and back covers, and 1 that measures 4 by 8.5. Now we're gonna take our 1.5 inch spacer and put it on the side here of our chipboard, or one of the sides of the spine. Our 1 inch spacer is gonna go at the top. And what that does for us is it provides a way for us to perfectly center our spine piece right here on that paper before we begin the wrapping process. I like to use liquid adhesive. Some people like to use, you know, score tape or double-sided tape, or other people like to use different types of liquid adhesive. It really doesn't matter. You do you. You use what's you know, preferable for you and how you kind of like to do it. There are pros and cons of each type, and I think we all just sort of settle on something that we like and we use it. So that's what I'm doing. I am using, what am I using? I'm using Reptile glue today because I forgot to put the pins in my glue bottles with the art glitter glue, and I didn't have time to clean out those tips. So once I've placed my spine piece centered on my spine, you know, wrapping piece, then I'm going to first check and see if there's any glue that has seeped out the sides, and I don't have any. Then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to run my bone folder right along the edge of the chipboard piece. I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. And you guys, this just basically prepares it for the fold. Think of it almost like, you know, you score your paper before you fold it. It sort of gets those fibers in preparation for the fold, right? So I'm gonna do that, and that. We're gonna go ahead and fold all around it, creasing very heavily as we go. And this paper has been really malleable and worked very well for me. It does shed a little bit on your work surface when you're doing these, you know, firm burnishings and kind of rubbing and stuff on it, but I haven't noticed that it sheds, you know, to the touch. So that part I like. And just because I'm using this gold shimmer paper to construct this album, you don't have to. You can use whatever cardstock you prefer for your album construction. I just thought this was fun. So I'm doing that. So now what I'm doing is I'm going around and I'm cutting out all 4 of the rectangles that are created by doing this fold, right? And so I'm going to cut all of those out. And once I've cut out all 4 of those rectangles, the next step is going to be to fold one side over around the chipboard, right? And I'm going to place my scissors right up next to that chipboard piece. I'm actually resting it on the chipboard piece, and I'm going to pivot ever so slightly out to create an angle and cut inward, you know, cut into this little tab here that's hanging out. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do the other side. So I got my scissors right there, and I'm just going to ever so slightly cut this little angle here. Can you see that? Then I'm going to fold the other side over, do the same thing. And then now that I've got all of those 4 sides done, then the next step is to do the same process on the wings. So scissors right up next to the chipboard, angling it out. And I'm just taking these really small wedges off of the paper. It's a little hard to do holding it up, but it worked. And then it does look like I've still got a little nubby on this one, so I'm just going to take my scissors and, you know, snip up to where it needs to be, and then snip it again and remove that completely. So that looks really good. Looks like I've got another one here. Snipping. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to glue the top and the bottom tab down. We're not going to do anything with these wings yet, but we're going to glue the top and bottom down. And how I like to do that is just run a bead of glue right along the chipboard. You see, just like that, and then fill in the space. So it looks like this, okay? And then I'm going to stand it up, kind of wiggle it out, bend it over on itself, give it a nice firm burnishing, lift it up. If there's any glue that has seeped out, I'm going to lift that off with my bone folder. I'm just going to kind of run it along here. Run your bone folder along the sides. Do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to run some glue right up along the edge of the chipboard. Fill in with some glue on the rest of the tab. Stand it up, bend it over, press it down, clean up any glue that might have seeped out. I'm going to kind of almost squeegeeing the glue out. You know, Tamara, again, who created this method, she explains the, you know, kind of the spreading of the glue is like you would do when you're wallpapering. You've got to spread out that wallpaper paste. So now I'm going to take my bone folder. I'm going to turn this entire spine piece over so the right side is facing up. And I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to do the same thing I did right before I cut out those rectangles, where I'm going to run the bone folder right along the edge of the chipboard that is the spine piece, right? And I'm really just accentuating that is creating a ridge there along there. And this is what it looks like, if you can see. My intention is to get the wings flush with the bottom side of the chipboard. So see how they wrapped around and now they're flush on the bottom side. So once that's done, I'm actually going to take this piece and I'm going to slide it underneath my mat. That's going to keep it from curling up or anything in the drying process. I am using water-based liquid adhesive. So I'm just going to do that. It's going to keep it straight while I go and work on wrapping my front and back cover. And for the front and back cover, we are not going to use the 1.5 inch spacer. So you can go ahead and put that spacer away. We are going to use 2 of the 1 inch spacers. We're going to place our cardstock in the scoreboard. I'm going to place my spacer at the top and the side, just like I did for the spine piece, but this time I'm using the 1 inch spacer all the way around. We cut our paper 2 inches larger in width and height than our chipboard, and so that results in a perfect centering of our chipboard once we place it on the paper. So I'm going to apply some glue just like I did on the spine and glue it down. We're going to press it into this sort of corner. I'm basically pressing into this upper left-hand corner. So I'm going up against the top spacer and up against the side spacer. And once I've got that where I want it to be, I'm simply going to remove my scoreboard, flip it over, take my burnishing tool, and I'm just going to press to each corner. I'm sort of pressing up towards each corner, and that is to make sure I've got full contact and also to sort of spread that glue around between the chipboard and the paper. When I turn it over, I'm going to check to see if any has seeped out. I do have just a small amount, And I run my bone folder along the edge of the chipboard to lift up any glue that may have seeped out during that time. Then we flip it over, and we're going to take our bone folder again and also run it right up along that chipboard, just like we have before. And this is going to act as a sort of scoring method for the paper, getting it ready to fold around the edge of the chipboard. So I can very easily do that without fear of any cracking or anything. And I will say, you guys, you know, like I said before, you don't have to use this shimmer cardstock, but it folds beautifully. I haven't had any cracking issues at all. I haven't had any problems with it. The only thing I will say is that it is a solid core paper, but every once in a while you'll see some kind of white fibers in it. And I think that's just where the kind of shimmer or the gold sort of rubs off. I'm not 100% sure. Once I've gone ahead and created those creases all the way around, now I'm going to cut out all 4 of these corners. And once I've cut out all 4 of the corners here, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with the spine piece. So I'm going to fold one edge over, lean my scissors right up along the edge there and give it a slight angle, and flip around and do that 8 times. There's 2 edges for each one of these sides. So I did all 4 of those, and now I'm going to fold this one back, clip that, clip that, clip this one, and this one. And you can sort of see here why I'm doing that. So I think you can. Can you see that there's a little nubby there? So when I do that, and it's not a big deal, it just makes it kind of fuzzy on your corners, and I like having crisp, clean corners. So once all of that's done, this is where I do a little bit of an extra step. So you can simply fold them over like this right now. You can simply glue them down, fold them over like this right now, and you're going to end up with this sort of square overlap. Okay, so you're going to have this place here where you double the thickness of your cardstock on your corners. Or you can do what I like to do, and I use this tool here I got from colorwayarts.com, and it is a miter tool, and it's just a solid piece of steel, and you place it right up next to the chipboard corner. It can't move anywhere else. It's locked in there. I take my finger blade or an X-Acto knife and just run it right along that edge because it's metal, so I can run my blade along there without fear of it nicking it or anything. Or if you prefer to use scissors, you can just take a pencil and, you know, draw that line and then cut on the line. And I go around all 4 sides and cut all of these miters that are perfect each and every time. And now what I've ended up with is something that looks like this. It's kind of a weird shape. I've got like a notch out with this miter cut. And what it does is now when I fold these over, I end up with a perfect corner every single time, just like I would with if I left them with the squares. That does it too. But because I've done it this way, I have less bulk here. I don't have all of that paper overlapping. And typically when you do the miters, you have to do that weird thing where you pinch the corners in, and that also creates bulk. And this way I don't have that. So for me, it's best of both worlds. It's how I like to do it. If you watch this and you think, oh my gosh, that's just too many steps, I don't want to do that, then do it your way. Your way is just fine. Everyone has their own personal way of doing things. This is just one that I'm sharing with you that works for me, and I will leave it at that. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to place our glue right up along the edge of the chipboard, just like we did when we folded the tabs back on the spine piece. Fill it in with glue, stand it up, give it a little wiggle, bend it over, press it out, give it a nice firm burnishing. Any glue that slips out, I just sort of wipe it up with my fingers, and then I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm really pressing it down and drawing across that where that paper connects with the chipboard, in an effort, if there's any extra glue, that way I can press it out and clean it up. Not too much coming out on this one. And then if you'll notice, I have kind of a rounded edge. And so what I like to do is I take my bone folder and I just run right along the edge of that chipboard, just back and forth. I'm pressing up against the chipboard, and then I'll finish it off by going once over the top. And then what that gives me is it gives me a very squared off edge here. So I hope you guys can see that. I like the finish on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue the other side, running my glue along the edge of the chipboard again, filling in the space, standing it up, giving it a little wiggle, bending it over, pressing it out, wiping up the glue, spreading out the glue. And this starts going much faster once once you've made a couple of them. And then I'm gonna take my bone folder, run right along that edge to give some definition to that edge, run back over once, go to the other one, glue on the edge, filling it in, just like that. Stand it up, wiggle it, flip it, press it. And we just keep repeating all of these steps, pressing out any extra glue that might have come along here. I do keep a microfiber cloth nearby. Sometimes that's nice just to wipe up the glue with. Spread it out, take my bone folder right along that edge, and looks like I do have a little nubby here on this corner. I'm going to give it a little slight clip. There we go. Same thing over here. There we go. Pressing it, kind of squaring off my edges. Now I've got these completed and I think they look really good. I'm going to go to this next one, glue up and against the chipboard, filling it in, stand it up, bend it over, press it out, clean up the glue, spread out the glue. You can see how this works, right? Give it a pressing, clean it off. There we go. Use a little bit of elbow grease, wiping that up. Oh, one more little edge. Okay, so now we've repeated the steps on all four sides and we have our, one of our covers completely, covered. It looks really good. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the exact same thing for the other one and I'll be right back. Once I've wrapped the front and back cover with my cardstock, then I'm gonna retrieve my spine piece from underneath my mat and it's kept it nice and straight and I'm really happy with that. You can see that. So then to glue those into place, we're simply going to place a bead of glue about, I don't know, just shy of 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the chipboard that is the spine piece on the wing. And then we're gonna fill it in with glue. And I've said before, it's not a lot of glue, but it's a lot of coverage. I want a really thin bead, but I want it to be, pretty much on all of the surface and covering everything, because this is essentially what's keeping our album together. This is the, one of the main structural components that's keeping it together. And then we're going to come along here on this edge and I'm going to put a bead of glue about 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of the chipboard. And then I'm going to put a little dollop of glue just to the inside of that line on either one of the side pieces here. So if you can see that. I've got a little dollop of glue here and then I've run this right along the edge. If I have any extra, I'll just sort of take my fingernail and run along the edge to clean it up if I need to. And then I'm going to place it on top of the wing here. I'm going to butt it right up next to the chipboard. Okay. So I've got it right up next to the chipboard. Center it top and bottom. So it should be flush with the top and the bottom. And when I press it down, it should lift up this other spine piece. And that's how I know I'm right up next to that edge. I'm going to take a burnishing tool and really press down. Turn it over. And then I'm going to take my bone folder and just really work that glue, making sure that I've got it all spread out evenly. If any extra is going to come out, I'm trying to make it, forcing it to come out at the top or the bottom, not the side, because I don't want to get any glue in there. And I don't want any glue to be on the edge of the chipboard of the cover or the edge of the chipboard of the spine. I want to make sure that there's no glue in those spots, and there's not, so I'm happy with that. And then I'm going to place some clips on here just to hold it in place, because this is water-based glue and it will swell the fibers of the paper. So by putting these clamps on here, I'm ensuring that it's staying together as it's going through that process where it's bonding. I hope that makes sense. And as you can see here, this is why I prefer to have those mitered corners, because it's less bulk there. So it's not pushing away at those corners. Like I said before, a lot of people don't have those problems, and that's awesome. They are doing something better than I was doing. I was having that problem, so mitering that as well as cutting out the squares, that worked for me. So then I'm just only going to leave those on for a short amount of time, really long enough for me to go ahead and apply the glue on the other side. So again, I'm coming just shy of 1/4 inch, running it along there, and then I'm going to fill in the rest of this wing piece. Lots of coverage, not lots of glue. Getting it all filled in. And then I'm going to take my other piece here and I'm going to run a thin bead of glue about 1/16 of an inch away. Just like that. Put a little dollop right there on either side. So it's going to look like that. I might have a little too close here. See, I just spread that back. Pull off my clamps. That's all they need to be on there for. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna butt the chipboard of the cover next to the chipboard of the spine, press it in there. You know, I'm really kind of pushing that in there. Once I get it in place and I press down, it sort of lifts up that spine piece. And I'm gonna really firmly burnish this down so that I've got good contact. Flip it over, spread out that glue, really making sure that it's spreading out everywhere it needs to be, wiping off any that seeps out the edges. I'm gonna make sure that I haven't got any seeping in here, and I don't. So I'm really happy with that. You can see there's no glue coming out of that. And then press that down again because I don't like to pull that out. And then go ahead and put my clamps on there and let that set for another minute or two. And then that is going to complete the attachment of our front and back cover to our spine. The next step is going to be to put some adhesive backing on the page that's going to cover the inside of the spine. Now, typically what I've done in the past and how I've seen Tamara do it, you know, how she does it and how I've seen other designers who use her method do it, is they cut a piece that's much narrower to cover that spine. I'm going ahead and cutting one the full length of that 11-inch paper, right? And the reason being is I don't know, it's there and I'm gonna go ahead and cover it all, and that way I've just got it in place. You don't need a piece that is that wide. I just want it to definitely come past these inner wings. I feel like it creates a lot of bulk there, and the further out I go with it, the more smooth that transition becomes. So I just figured on this one, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it the whole thing. Now, the height wise on it, remember our album is 6.5 inches tall. So for the height on this, I cut this just about 1/16 of an inch shy of 6.5 inches because I want it to come almost all the way to the edge. If you're not comfortable with that, or you want one that's going to be a little bit, you know, smaller than that, that's totally fine. Cut it 1/4 inch shy, you know, make it 6.25 inches. It's not going to matter. It's going to be totally fine. It's just how I do it. So let's preface this whole thing with this entire video is an exercise in how I do it. And I'm hoping that you can get some insights into that. Maybe something works for you, or maybe it's just a way for you to eliminate that's not what I want to do in my album construction, and that's beneficial too. So, and the adhesive that I'm going to use on these is the adhesive from scrapbook.com. This is their brand of double-sided adhesive sheets. In the past and in my other video that I'm linking, I used the Score brand on the Score sheets, and I do love those. In fact, I prefer those ever so slightly to the scrapbook.com brand, but this is a very close second. I mean, it's almost, I really probably couldn't tell the difference, but it's just that these were on such a great sale. I couldn't pass up the economical aspect of purchasing these. So that's what we're going to use today. And they say they're 8.5 by 11, but I find that they're just a little bit short of 11 inches. I don't know that it really matters, but I'm going to go ahead and attach my inside spine cover piece to the adhesive, and then I'm going to have to cut a little bit off of my inside spine piece because, as you can see, I've got a little bit hanging over here. So that's what we're going to do. Set this aside. And how I do that is I simply peel back a corner of the adhesive sheet here. And then I'm going to take my my cover piece, and I'm going to try to, I'm lining up the edge, right? And then I'm going to come up here to the corner and make sure I line up this other edge as well. And it's kind of slipping around on me. So let's see if I can do this. There we go. And once I get that where I want it to be, I'm just going to press into the adhesive backing on that corner. I'm going to lift this up, peel the rest of this off. Crease it to keep it out of the way. And then I will take my finger blade and run just right along the edge of that paper. Now I'm not pressing hard, and I'm just gently drawing it right along the edge of that paper. I'm sort of allowing the blade to rest along the edge of the gold paper of my cardstock here. And I'm just running it ever so gently down there, and it will just release on its own. Let me go ahead and press this down, save it for another project. And then, as you can see, the 11 inches on the adhesive sheets aren't a full 11 inches, or maybe my paper is a little bit beyond 11 inches. I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter. All I'm going to do is take my finger blade again, and just this time I'm dragging it along the edge of the adhesive, not just the edge of the cardstock. And once that is free, then I'll pull that off. And there we go. I'm going to make sure I've given this a really good firm burnishing. I don't want any air bubbles between the adhesive and the paper. I want full contact. It does look like I was a little crooked here, so I'm going to take my scissors and sort of clean up this just little bit of adhesive that's peeking out. A little there and a little there. I do notice that the adhesive isn't, or the adhesive sheets aren't as maybe squared up on the scrapbook.com brand. The adhesive sheets aren't as squared up as let's try this again. The adhesive sheets of the scrapbook.com brand are not as squared up as the adhesive sheets of, say, the Suk Wang Score tape brand. And so maybe that's a difference. I don't know, but the price was so good. I don't care. It's fine. So now we're going to bring back our front and back cover and spine that's all been attached to each other. And I'm going to simply, double check to make sure it's sitting where I want it to, and it is. And this is a feel thing. I'm using my fingers on the edge of the chipboard of the base to act as a stop. And when I get it where I want it to be, then that's going to be the stopping point. I'm going to peel back a corner of the adhesive backing. Give it a little bit of a, pressing down there so that that's out of the way. And then making sure that my adhesive side isn't touching yet, I'm just going to sort of float this above. And when I get it where I want it to be on all 4 sides. I'll press that down, or the top and bottom, I guess, not necessarily all 4 sides. I'm gonna press that down, and then I will peel back the rest of the backing. Burnish it really well. Again, I don't want any air bubbles between here. Giving it a really firm burnishing all around. And I'm really happy with that. Take my smaller bone folder and run it along that joint where the front and back cover attach to the spine. And I'm just sort of bending the cover piece as I'm running that back and forth. Do the other side. And I'm just really making sure that I'm slowly increasing the acuteness of this angle as I'm running back and forth. I'll bend it over all the way over on itself, give it a firm burnishing. Do the same thing over here, give it a firm burnishing. And that's it, you guys. We have attached our front and back cover to the spine, and we have placed our spine cover piece inside of there. And now we're ready to go ahead and start working on the hinges. For the hinges, I use 2 different pieces to attach my hinges to the spine. One is the traditional hinge mechanism, right? And then the other one is a hinge attachment system. The hinge attachment system is completely optional. You don't have to do that. You can simply glue the hinges directly on the spine, as a lot of other people do in their album making. But for me, I find that it gives a lot of strength actually to my album because it isn't as fixed on the spine. So therefore I'm alleviating any stress at the spine when those pages want to move a little bit beyond, you know, that fixed point. But it's just personal preference. You guys don't have to do it. Do what works for you. But for those pieces here, I have got, for the hinge, I've got a piece that measures 3.5 inches by 6.25 inches. And for the hinge attachment, I have a piece that measures 2.5 by 6.25. Now on the hinges themselves, I'm doing these a little different than I normally do. And that is because I'm trying to accommodate for the fact that this is only a 1-inch spine. So usually I do, 5/8 of an inch tall hinges, and I do a 5/8 of an inch gusset in between my pages. It's just how I prefer to do it. On this one, I'm doing that differently. I am doing a 1/2 of an inch tall hinge, and I'm only doing a 3/8 of an inch gusset between those hinges than for the hinge themselves. So the measurements are going to be a little different. Also, I'm making an additional change, and that is that on the front and the back hinge, that first fold piece, I'm reducing it by 1/8 of an inch. So the first score mark is actually going to be for the first hinge, but it's only going to be at 3/8 of an inch. The second score mark is going to be at 7/8 of an inch, which is a 1/2 of an inch. So the first one is only 3/8 of an inch. The second one is a 1/2 of an inch. The reason for that is because as those pages and the hinges move back and forth, I need that front piece to not go all the way down because sometimes it will catch. So rather than trimming it off at the end of making my hinges, which was what I've done in the past, and I've seen Tamara do that too, and she constructs hers very similarly. I'm just reducing it from the beginning. I'm just gonna take that off from the very beginning. So we're gonna score it at 3/8 of an inch and 7/8 of an inch. Now that's gonna be our first hinge, okay? And then we're gonna score it 1, 2, 3/8 of an inch over at 1 1/4. That's gonna be our gusset. And then we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. So a 1/2 an inch, that's gonna be our next hinge. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the back side of our next hinge. 1, 2, 3 for the gusset. 1, 2, 3, 4 for our hinge. And then we're left with 1, 2, 3 for the back side of that hinge. So again, it's going to be at 3/8 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch, 1 1/4, 1 3/4, 2 1/4, 2 5/8, and 3 1/8. And with this shimmer cardstock, and then also with the pearlized cardstock of the artisan cardstock, which I've used to make hinges with too, and they're beautiful. I have found that it helps if I score it the first time with the larger end of my scoring tool, the larger circle here, and then I go back over it again lightly with the smaller one. It's just something about the paper and maybe that coating that's put on it when it's pearlized or it has a sheen to it. And I have just found that if I go over it like that, I end up with a crisper fold. It helps it. I don't know why. So the way this works, again, just one more time, I hope I'm not boring you guys, but I'm going to go over it one more time. The first two sections here are for that first hinge. The first one is 1/8 of an inch short of the back side of it, and that is so that it can allow for the movement that we need it to allow for. Then I've got a 3/8 of an inch section, that's the gusset. Then this is page 2. These are the hinges. And then I've got a 3/8 of an inch section, that's the gusset. And then the third page, which is a 1/2 of an inch hinge with 3/8 on the back side, and that's how we're doing it. So we're gonna fold these like this. It's gonna be mountain, valley, valley, mountain, valley, valley, mountain, okay? And I like to fold those 3/8 of an inch ones first on the edges. I feel like it just sort of helps me keep everything straight. I don't know why, and there's probably no real reason to it, except that I think it gives me more leverage when I have the full sheet of paper to bend over on itself, so I do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold the gussets then accordingly. So I've got mountain, valley, valley. There's a valley fold on either side of the gussets. And as I'm doing this, you want to make sure that your top and bottom pieces are lined up perfectly, that I don't have anything hanging over from where I folded that piece over, that it's lined up perfectly. And that's going to make sure that all of my hinges are staying straight and true. And I like to give it a really firm burnishing. The first go over is a little bit lighter, just sort of easing it into place. And then I want to really get a crisp fold on that. Do the next one, making sure that my edges are perfectly lined up. I don't want any crooked hinges here. There we go. Pressing that one out. Okay, so I've got my hinge and my gusset. Okay. And now we're going to go back to another mountain fold, and this is the page 2 hinge. And I'm making sure that everything is lined up. This is a good checking point because that mountain fold, the fold for page 2, is dead center of that piece of paper. So if you can make sure all 3 of your edges here are lined up with the one below, then you know that you are straight and true on that. And then I'm going to do my 2 valley folds on either side of my gusset. Making sure it's totally lined up and straight. There we go. And then the last one, got this one last valley fold here on the gusset. There we go. And that completes all of our folds. So now we're left with a piece that looks like this. Okay. So we've got mountain, valley, valley, mountain, valley, valley, and mountain. And as you can see, I'm 1/8 of an inch shy here on these edges, and that's totally fine. I just don't want that bolt coming down here, because then when the page opens this way, sometimes, let me show you this way. When the page opens this way, sometimes that piece of paper will catch. And so this will keep it from doing that. So now we're going to go ahead and glue our hinges together. And how I'm going to do that is I'm simply going to put the glue on the back side of, between these mountain folds, right? Starting with the piece that is only 3/8 of an inch wide, because I don't want to get glue, beyond where that's going to come into place. Press it down and spread it out. And I'm really, really, really trying to make sure that this becomes a fully laminated, singular unit. I'm doubling up this paper as if it were a thicker piece of paper. I don't want any space between it. And see how I'm pressing the glue out of each end? That makes me happy, because that lets me know that I have the glue all the way to the edge and I'm not missing any contact with that piece. So that's our first page. Then we've got the gusset in the middle here, and then we're going to place some glue on the second page. And again, if you prefer to use score tape or, you know, adhesive, dry adhesive of some sort, go for it. That's fine. I feel like that the liquid glue gives me a better bond, and I am sure that this, you know, it will never come apart. It is stuck down. I've tried to take things apart before. They don't come apart. So press that one down. Really squeezing it out the edges. And I'm getting glue on my paper in places that I don't want glue on my paper, and that's okay. I'll come back over it and clean it up with one of those, you know, rubber eraser things that can kind of rub off that glue. But I've gone back and forth. I'm placing my hinge both to the left and to the right. Let me wipe off some of this. Oh, it's on my fingers. That's why. Okay. So I've got my hinge going this direction. I'm going to bend it back this way. And then from the back side, I'm giving it a nice firm burnishing again. Just like that. And I'm just going back and forth until I get it exactly where I want it to be. And where I want it to be is I want it to be flush, right? And we're going to apply glue to the third page, again, starting on that 3/8 of an inch piece, not the 1/2 of an inch piece. I've already made enough of a mess with glue. I don't need to put extra glue out there. Press it down. Give it a nice, you know, smoothing, and then a firm burnishing that's really pressing that glue out of the ends, if there is any. There we go. Clean it up. Okay. And I'm really happy with the way this looks. I think it's all great. I'm going to go from the front now, and I'm going to press them one way, and then I'm going to bend them the other way and give it a nice firm pressing here. Just getting it, oops, didn't mean to do that. I'm just getting it ready to move in the way that I need it to move, if that makes sense. So, you know, I need this to be the mechanical aspect here. I need it to actually be able to move. So once that's all done, I am going to take my little eraser here, and I'm just going to try to rub off any extra glue that I've gotten on these hinges. Now keep in mind, the pages are going to cover most of it, but I still just want it to be clean. I don't want to have any residue on there because I don't want anything to get in the way of the ability for them to adhere to each other. You know, I don't want any barriers in the way. And the back side here, that's where I got a lot. There we go. All good. Good as new. So I'm going to set these aside. If you don't want to do the hinge attachment, okay, if you just want to directly glue these onto your book, you can completely do that. You're just going to open it up, and you are going to center it top, bottom, left, and right in that space. You're going to apply glue all over the back of these hinges, which is essentially on the back side of the gussets. You're going to place it down, get it centered just where you want it to be. Use your bone folder, go between, you know, on those gussets and give it a nice firm burnishing so that it's in place, and that's it. You're done. And you can totally do that. That's completely fine. But if you want, you can do this hinge attachment system, which I really like to do. So in doing that piece, you're going to take your piece that measures 2.5 by 6 1/4, and you're going to score it at 1/2 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch, and 3/4 of an inch. And then you're going to score it at 1 3/4, 1 7/8, and 2. Okay. And like I said, I'm going to go back over it with the finer side, just gently go back over it with the finer side of my scoring tool so that I can try to get a crisper crease on those folds. Okay, and so what this is we've got a 1/2 inch that's going to attach to our book. We have these 3 scores here that are going to result in an 1/8 inch accordion fold. This 1 inch section here is what is our hinges are going to be glued down to. And then we've got, again, these 3 folds here are an accordion fold, and another 1/2 inch is here. These score marks are going to be folded mountain, valley, mountain, mountain, valley, mountain. And I have found that it's much easier if you begin with all of your mountain folds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fold all 4 of the mountain folds. There's 2 on either side of that kind of 1 inch section here. Doing the same thing I did for my hinges, making sure that I'm, you know, even top and bottom with the piece that's folding over, so I'm not going off on a tangent or anything. I'm staying true to that score mark. And then once I have folded all of the mountain folds, I'll show you how we're going to get those valley folds in place. Okay, so now we have all of our mountain folds scored, you know, or folded and burnished, and we end up with this sort of like squared tube, right? This rectangular tube. And what we're going to do now is we're going to fold these valley folds that are going to be between those 2 mountain folds. That's that center score mark that we made. And this is how we're going to do that. We're going to lay it down. You're going to lay it down like this, where you've got your, you know, 2 mountain folds over here. I'm going to place my fingers on this top piece so that it doesn't go beyond where I want it to be in this kind of perpendicular placement. So it's straight up and down. I'm going to take my scoring tool and I'm just going to run very gently right along that score mark that I already made. And I'm applying light pressure from the top, and it's going to follow the path of least resistance. It's going to start folding over on itself. Once it does, and I'll go back and forth between my bone folder and my scoring tool, you know, just whichever one works best. This I like to use for the first go back and forth because it sits up higher. This is more flush to the table, so as it starts to fall down, it kind of falls right into that place. And once I've sort of eased it into place like this, you can sort of see that, then I'll take my fingers and I want to match the 2 mountain folds to each other. So I'll go along here and just sort of pinch to press those, that's too close, to kind of press those 2 together so that they're flush with each other. So like this. I'm just going to pinch them down so that they match up. And all I'm really worried about is just making sure that it's not, you know, hyperextended beyond the fold of the other one, so they're lining right up with each other. And once I've sort of pinched that into place and it's where I want to see it, then I'll go back over it with my my bone folder and give it a nice firm burnishing, and then it's going to look something like that. Okay, kind of see that. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to gently hold this sort of flap, this 1/2 inch flap here, run my scoring tool right in that groove that I'd already scored on my scoreboard. Get it to start falling down on itself. I switch over to my bone folder, and then I'll just start pinching them together, making sure that I'm lining them up. My goodness, I have a lot of glue on my fingers. I'm gonna have to go wash my hands here in a second. In my defense, I've now made 2 album covers that just wasn't recording. Oh, sorry, I have to laugh at myself sometimes. Okay, so now I've got that pressed down, and then what we've ended up with is we've got a piece that looks something like this. So we still have this sort of squared off tube. It's just that I've got accordion folds on either side like that. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach our hinges to the hinge attachment system. And after all that folding we did, we're going to open it back up. I know you're like, what? But those scores, those burnishings that we did on those score marks, they're going to stay in place. It will have some sort of, the fiber has sort of a memory. We'll be able to put it right back. But we're going to open it up so that we can attach these. And I'm simply going to put glue all over the back side of these 2 gussets here on the back side of the hinges. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's not a lot of glue. It's just a lot of coverage. So just make sure you're covering the whole thing. And once we've got it completely covered, we are going to center it side to side. Now, top to bottom, it's exactly the same height, so I don't have to worry about that. But I am trying to center it side to side. I want to make sure I've got the same reveal on each side. Scooch it just a little bit. That looks good. And then I'm going to come in here with my bone folder, and I'm going to gently at first, because I don't want it to shift, you know, I don't want it to be slippery there underneath the glue. And it did, it shifted just a little bit. So press it back up, slide it back up there. There we go. And I'm going to run my bone folder right along those gussets, making sure that I'm getting right up next to the hinge of that center page, the center hinge on here. Folding it back and forth, making sure I've got good contact. And once I get it where I really am happy with it, I've burnished it, then I'm going to put all my hinges to one side, come over it with my bone fold or my burnishing tool, put all my hinges to the other side, come over it with my burnishing tool, turn it over from the back side, and really rub all of this in. Move them back over, same thing. And now I have a piece that is just all, it's basically one unit, right? And then I can go ahead and re-burnish these folds that I had. See how they just go right back into place. Once we've sort of set that, the fiber again has a memory and it goes right into place. And now we can go ahead and attach this into our album. And how we're going to attach this to our album is we're going to apply glue on one side of these so you've got these two pieces here on either side that are 1/2 inch wide, and we're going to apply glue on one of them just the same way we did to the back side of our hinges when we attached them down. So full coverage just on this 1/2 inch strip here. Okay, and get that glue off my finger. And then we're going to place it right up to the edge, right up to the edge of the chipboard, and about 1/8 of an inch from the top and the bottom. So I'm centering it top to bottom, giving myself about 1/8 of an inch from the top and the bottom, checking to make sure, but I'm on the very edge of that chipboard that is the spine. Because our spine is 1 inch wide, and our 2 1/2 inch attachment pieces are going to add up to 1 inch, and so it's going to take up that whole area, but it's not going to get in the way at all with our ability for our book to open and close. So that's kind of a nice little feature there, and I've got it centered here. I'm perfectly centered there on the spine. I'm giving it a nice firm burnishing. The good part is I can sort of open this up and give it a nice firm burnishing. And now I'm going to apply glue on the other 1/2 inch piece. And then once I've got the glue on the other 1/2 inch piece, I'm simply going to press this down and I'm gonna like slide it over until it butts up against that other one that I just attached, right? And it's going to line up perfectly because it is a 1-inch section, right? And I've got 2 1/2-inch pieces here, and they're gonna just butt up right there. I'm gonna give it a nice firm burnishing here from this edge. And go ahead and fold this back over on itself, really pressing it down. Boy, I've got glue everywhere. And then I can take my bone folder and I can slip it inside here, and I'm pressing down as I'm sort of pushing in, just making sure I've got good contact all around. And I do, I can feel it. This really is a feel thing, and you can feel when it's lined up, it's not overlapping or anything. And now I have attached my hinges using my hinge attachment system here to my spine. So you end up with something that looks like this. It looks, it looks weird, I know. Let me get the pages on and it's gonna make a lot more sense, I promise. So the pages of our album are going to measure 6 1/4 by 6 1/4. And I have cut, since I'm using 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock, and because I don't want to have to use extra cardstock if I don't need to, so I cut 3 pieces that measure 6 1/4 by 11, and then the cutoff pieces here, they measure 2 1/4 by 11. So that's just the cutoff here. We're going to use these pieces, but we're just going to cut them down to a 6 1/4 inch length. And rather than making that cut and risking maybe making it too short or too wide or something like that, I'm just going to keep it intact, and then we'll trim it down with the page here when we get to that point, and you'll see what I mean by that. So this took 3 full sheets of 8 1/2 by 11 paper. I just simply cut them down to 6 1/4 inches wide by 11, and I'm using the cutoffs here. So how we're going to do this is we're going to place our pieces in our scoreboard with the 11 inch at the top, and we're going to score this at 6 1/4 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing where I go over it with the wider end of my scoring tool, and then I'm going to finish it off with the narrow end. If you're using regular cardstock for this, you don't have to do that. I just think it gives you a really crisp edge. And then we're going to fold this over, again, making sure that our sides are lined up. Give it a nice firm burnishing, both sides here. I'm going to go through and do my other 2 here. Now that I have scored, folded, and burnished all 3 of my pieces here, then as you can tell, I've got a little bit of a gap here, and that's where these cutoff pieces are going to come into play. I'm simply going to line them up so that they are flush with this top edge and the side edge. So I'm going to make sure that that corner is nice and flush up here. Or the other option is to simply go beyond. I think this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make sure it lines up here with this the side edge here, right? And then you can see when this folds over, I need to place some glue from here over so I can sort of see where the glue line needs to be. I'm going to place some glue about 1/2 inch on this side here. Make sure I get it on my edge. Fill it all in. Put a little bead of glue over here on the edge of this. And then bend it over and press it into place. And what I've done is I've just basically created an extension to this paper, making it long enough so that I can have a 6 1/4 inch, finish on my fold. Where normally I would need a 12 1/2 inch piece of paper to be able to do this. Now that I've used that scrap, I mean, it's just going to be fine. So now I'm going to take my my paper cutter, paper trimmer, and I'm simply going to line it up so that this edge is flush here. And I'm going to give it a quick little cut to trim off this excess. Turn it around and do the same thing. There we go. And now I have a perfectly squared, folded piece of paper that once folded is a perfect 6 1/4 by 6 1/4 inch square. I'm going to do the same thing on the other 2 and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've got all 3 of my pages They are, they measure 6 1/4 by 6 1/4 square. I did do that little, you know, seam on the edge there, but you're never going to see that. That's going to be completely covered by pattern paper, and it's not going to interfere with the ability of our tag to go in and out at all. So it works out really well. And now let's go ahead and attach our pages into our book. And again, I use liquid adhesive. You can use whatever works for you. You know, take something that you see me doing and play with it, make it your own, you know, you do you. Okay, I know how to do me. That's all I know how to do. And even that is probably questionable sometimes. So I don't know. So what I have done here is I am taking the page, I'm opening it up. So I've got the full width here now. Now it measures 12 1/2 inches wide by 6 1/4 inches tall. And I'm going to place it right up next to that hinge there. Okay. We're just going to butt it right up next to that hinge. I'm going to come right up next to the edge. And so I'm going to line it up top to bottom. It should be the same, and it is. And once I've got it right up next to that hinge, then I'm going to close the hinge. And when I do that, it sort of pushes the page back. You'll feel the page being pushed back away from the very edge of that hinge like we had originally started. And I want it to do that. That's going to give it the spacing that I need, because I need just a hair off of it being right up next to that hinge so that it can move back and forth freely without catching there. And once I've got that, then I'm going to open the hinge back up. I'm going to place the glue about 3/4 of the way down from the hinge. So starting at the top of the hinge, I'm going to go down about 3/4 of the way, which honestly, because I've got this one at 3/8 of an inch on each side, it's pretty easy. I've got a line there to follow, right? So place this on here. Then I'm going to run a small thin bead of glue just along the edge of this page. Okay. Still holding it in place. It hasn't moved. I'm going to bring this back on over, press it down, find my bone folder. It's always buried. Give it a nice firm burnishing, being careful to not, you know, let the pages shift while you're doing that. Rub off any extra glue that's come out. I'm going to open it back up the other way, give it another firm burnishing. And I'm just making sure I don't have any glue coming out of here. And now on this one, it's really simple because I've opened it up to check and see. I've got the same reveal top and bottom around here. My page is straight and true. I'm happy with it. And I'm simply going to repeat the steps where I'm going to put the glue beginning at the top of the hinge that's now attached to the back side of the page here. And I'm going to come down about 3/4 of the way with the glue, filling in between. And this time I'm creating a pocket. So I'm going to run a bead of glue right along the bottom of my page, just like that. And then I'm going to run a bead of glue along this edge, just like that. We're going to fold it back over on itself, and I'm going to make sure it's not, you know, moving at all, puckering or anything. Fold it back over on itself. Sorry, I had to get my fingers out of the way of the glue there. Pressing it down, making sure I've got good contact. I do have a little bit of glue seeping out of the top and bottom, and that's totally fine with me. I'm just going to clean it up. Between gardening and paper crafting, and I do a little bit of woodworking and other stuff, my nails always look awful. I know. I see all y'all with your pretty nails, and I just never really knew how to do that stuff. I mean, sometimes I'll have my nails done, but you know, these are working hands. I don't know what I'm saying. You guys, I'm already tired, and we haven't even assembled the pages on the book yet. Okay, so that's the first page, and then we're just going to do the same steps on adding the other pages. And so I like to work from the back to the front. I like to position the seam on the back. It doesn't matter. It's just more to remind me which one is the back and the front than anything else. So I'm going to place this one on. I'm making sure that my page is lined up with the page below. Okay, so I've got my edges all lined up here. It's perfectly lined up with the page below. I've pressed it up against this hinge, let me open this up so you can see, lining up with the page below, press it up against the hinge. When I push it back, it pushes the page back, okay? I'm double checking to make sure that this is lining exactly where I want it, and it is. And so I'm gonna open this page. I'm holding this page down, so it's not moving at all. And then I'm gonna place some glue at the top of the hinge coming down 3/4 of the way. Just like this. Put a small bead of glue right on the edge of that page. Holding it down, push the hinge back on over it. Sometimes you have to kind of press it down so it'll go over, and then give it a nice firm burnishing. We've attached it to one side of the hinge. Fold it over. I'm going to do a little check. I'm making sure that it's all straight over here. Yep, looks good. Making sure when I open both of them, they're straight. Looks good. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue this one down. And if it didn't, I could pull that off, you know, quickly. It might leave some marks, but I'm just going to glue it back over again, so it wouldn't matter. But I've done this enough that I don't have to do that. Sometimes I have in the past, and that's okay. And I probably still will in the future because I make mistakes, right? Oh, it's the best way to learn though, right? I'm big on celebrating mistakes, especially with my kids. You know, I want them to come to me when they've got a mistake. We sort of talk it through. How could we make adjustments? And then I always end those conversations with, good job, go make a new mistake. Because that's the best way you learn stuff, right? Okay, so pressing that down, got my pocket in place here. And I'm going to do the same thing on the third page, and I will be right back. So all of our pages are now in our book. They're attached to our hinges. They're working perfectly. This is where I can sort of show you the how that hinge attachment works and how it just gives a lot more flexibility to the pages in the book, so they're not, you know, trying to pull it away from the spine so much. And there's a little bit of articulation in there, and I like it. So this is looking really good. I'm very happy with it. I am going to actually skip a few steps here, and I'm going to go to making my tags. And the reason being is I want to stick my tags in my pocket as a visual reminder of what the top is, so I know which one is the front and the back. I have way more times than I can count, and certainly more times than I'm proud of, attached something in my album upside down. And I don't want to have to redo it again, especially because since I just realized that it wasn't recording the first time, I've already now made not one, but 2 album covers here. Yeah, that's fun. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut my tags out so that I can slip them in the top so that I know where they are. For my tags, I'm going to begin with pieces that measure 7 inches by 4 1/4 inches. And I'm going to use this die. Now, you don't have to do a die cut on your tags. You can simply start with a piece of paper and, you know, notch the corners, round the corners, keep the corners square. It doesn't really matter. But for me, I am going to use my die cutting machine and this Heartfelt Creations tag die that I just love. Comes with the corresponding matting die, and I just think it's super cool. So how I'm going to do this, these are taller than this die, right? And I want them to be taller because I want them to stick out ever so slightly from the top of our album, like this one has. I like the way that looks. I think it looks really pretty, so that's what I'm going for. Now, in order to achieve that, since the tags on these dies are shorter than the tags that I want to make, is I'm only going to partially run it through my die cutting machine. So let's get this positioned so you can actually see it. I'm going to take my piece and place it on the platform. I'm going to try to center it on here, and I'm going to come just so that the top of it is almost touching, the top of this circle part here is almost touching the top of the paper. Now we've cut these a little longer than they need to be. I will still be able to trim them down. That's going to be just fine. And I'm trying to make sure that I've got a similar reveal on each side, just so that I've, you know, it's somewhat straight, but you'll see in a minute that that's not going to matter so much. I'm going to take some of this repositionable tape and place it right there just so that it doesn't move on me. Put my top plate on, and I'm going to run it about 3/4 of the way through the die cutting machine. I'm not going to go all the way to the end, and I'm going to back it back out. Okay. Peel off the tape, and I'm going to use the same piece of tape for all 3 of them. So, and then this is what I'm left with. I'm left with a weird thing that looks like this. It's not cut all the way through, and that's exactly what I want. Let me run my other 2 through, and I'll be right back and show you what we're going to do next. Now I've run the 3rd one through, and like I said, we've got something that looks kind of like this. Let's put the die cutting machine away here. And I just leave it on the floor when I'm using it. I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm just going to trim off this top part here that was cut out, right? Just trim those off. Now that I've got those trimmed off, I'm going to use my paper trimmer. And I do prefer a guillotine cutter, you guys. I think it works really well. And I'm going to, I don't know if you can see here, I'm going to place my fingers on this side of the cutting edge, and I'm going to press the edge that was just cut. Can you see that? I'm going to press the edge that was just cut up against there so that I've got 2 points of contact to make sure that that's straight along that cutting edge. And then I'm just going to drop my cutter right down, and that's going to give me a straight cut that's flush with this initial cut that I made here, right? Do the same thing on the other side. I'm not lining up the bottom here on the cutter because that could be off ever so slightly depending on how I did this. If I really want to line something up on the second pass through, I'm going to check this edge, and I'm going to make sure that this is the same, but I'm not going to line it up with the bottom because that may not be square to the cuts that we've already made, if that makes sense. And then for the length, I know that I want this to be from this shoulder piece right here. I want that shouldered piece to be 5 3/4 inches long from that kind of shoulder of this one here. So I'm just going to line that up. If you're using a different die, if you're using different tags, something like that, just measure, you know, put a piece of paper in there and measure. Here, I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that one. And then I'll take my 1/4 inch corner rounder to my edges. And that is how I turned this die into one that was a little bit longer to fit my needs. So I hope that helps. Now, if I'm trying to figure out how long I want it to be, sometimes I'll just take my book and I'll just take a piece of, just a random piece of paper, and I'll place it in there, see where it stops at the top, make a little tick mark with a pencil, and then I can measure that. And that's how I'm going to determine what the length is. For these, I've already made it a couple times, so I just know that I want that shoulder to line up with the 5 3/4 inch mark, and that's going to be the perfect length for what I want them to be. So I'm going to run through this one more time real quickly. I press it up against the edge so that I know that I'm straight with that cut. Drop my blade down. Come to the other side. I'm doing the same thing, lining it up here on the edge, making sure that I am I'm straight with that. Drop it down. Come over here to the 5 3/4 inch mark at the tip of the shoulder. Give it a little trim, and that is our tag. Oh yeah, do my little 1/4 inch corner rounds. And I cut mine twice. I have to flip it over. My chomper is cutting crooked, so that's the only way I can get them straight, but you probably won't have to do that. All right, let me do the next one. I'll be right back. Okay, my tags are complete. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my album here, and I'm going to slip them in, and that's going to give me a visual reminder that this is the top. So I don't start putting things in upside down, because I just did that the other day. Of course, I was on a Zoom call with some of my friends, and I was talking and cutting and doing all those things at the same time, and it didn't end up well for me. So now I know what the top is. Let's go ahead and work on the decorating our front and back cover. I like to do it at this point because I don't have a lot of stuff on my pages at this point, and it's really easy for me to lay it flat on my work surface. And now that I've got this visual reminder that that's the top, I won't put things on backwards. And we'll go from there. And I will cover the tags with pattern paper. We'll put the grommets in and do all that, but I'm going to do that at the end. I just wanted to jump ahead and do that right now just so that I could remind myself which is the top of the album, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to put some tape on here to remind me that I need to attach ribbon, and to probably just go ahead and attach my ribbon on there. And I'm going to use this 1-inch double-sided tape. It's very inexpensive. I bought it from Amazon. And I'm just using it to attach my ribbon, so not a big deal. I'm using the grid on my cutting mat to line it up so I can find the center. And once I've located the center of it, I'm just gonna let the tape kind of fall into place, give it a little burnishing, do the same thing on the other side. And now I'm gonna go ahead and cut my ribbon pieces. So I took all my ribbon off of the spools and wound them up, and I keep them with some rubber bands around them and then put them in a jar, and I'm able to store a lot more in a lot less space that way. So I'm really happy with the way that's turned out. You just take the rubber band off of it, and then I'm going to cut my lengths. I need 24 inches. I'm going to do 2 pieces that are 12 inches. So I'm just going to kind of roll it out here, clip it, put my rubber bands back on, and then back into the jar it goes. And it works really well. This is a much smaller little something to store than an entire spool of the ribbon. So I like it. Cut it to 24 inches. I'm going to fold it in half and cut it in half again. So I've got 2 pieces that are 12 inches long. You won't need a full 12 inches. I'm just cutting extra. Somewhere around maybe 10 inches, 8 to 10 inches is what you really need. I'm cutting extra. I'll trim it off at the end, but that way I know that I've got plenty. I was trying to get a straight cut there. It didn't happen. Let's do that. I'm going to remove the backing on this tape, lay it down here right in the center, about 1 inch in to the book itself on the cover. Come back over it with another piece of double-sided tape so I can sort of encase it in that. And that's it. And do the other side real quick. Now that I've got my ribbon in place, it's time to go ahead and cut my cardstock pieces to cover my front and back cover and my spine. The first piece I'm going to use for the matting for the front and back cover here started as a 12 by 12 sheet of cardstock, and I cut it to just shy of 6.5 inches wide. And then I'm going to lay it on here, checking to see, you know, what size it needs to be. And obviously I've got it a little bit longer than it needs to be, and I'm pretty close to the size that I need it to be, but I'm going to trim it down some. And that's why my first cut is always a little bit larger, because I'm going to place it on the actual cover piece. That way I can cut it exactly to the measurements of the cover. And so I'm going to come over here, I'm going to make a little tick mark over here on this side, and I'm going to make a little tick mark down here on where that needs to be trimmed to. And then I'm going to use my paper trimmer, go ahead and cut this first one. I give you guys the measurements so that you can just make the cuts, right? But I'm a big believer in making it, you know, fit. I guess this is from my trim carpentry days. You know, you always cut it a little bit long, and then you go back and you do your fine tuning, right? That's kind of what you do in finish work, right? We want it to be a good custom finish here. So I'm going to check that. It looks like it's still a little bit long width-wise. So I'm going to trim it just a little hair off of the width. I'm going to go ahead and glue that one down. All right, so now onto the spine. That's easy because we just used this piece to, you know, attach this one. I'm going to go ahead and cut the spine out of this one. And because I'm doing the lay flat method, and because when the album is open, you see the edges of the front and the back cover, the front and the back chipboard piece. So I'm actually going to cut my first layer of matting to the exact same size as the chipboard. I'll still end up with a reveal around it. It's just not going to be on the chipboard portion. It's going to be having to do with kind of those joints there, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cut this to 1 inch as well, but I need to change my height on this, and I'm going to use my first piece as a template, make a little tick mark there so I know exactly where I need to trim that down to. Get my trimmer, I'm gonna put this over to the 1-inch mark and give it a quick cut. And then I'm gonna trim that little bit off that I marked on the height. Okay, so that's done. Just gonna dry fit it first, place it in. Everything looks really good. Move it over a little bit. Yep, I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna glue that down. And now that I've got that one in place, it's time to move on to my back cover. And because this is 6.5 inches, and because I'm using 12 by 12 cardstock to begin with, you know, I can't cut 2 out of that same piece like this. I'm not going to end up with that. And how I'm going to address that is I'm going to put a seam in it. I'm going to attach another piece of paper to this one so that I can create a piece that's large enough. Now, you're not going to be able to see it, but in this one, I went ahead and covered it with a piece, you know, of the Love from Lizzie peel-offs on the seam. And so you can always do that. Honestly, I didn't need to do that. I did it just out of, I was just being extra, I don't know, I was just being extra. But I could have just left it off and you wouldn't have seen it. You're not going to notice it. It's on the back. It's totally fine. But I am going to go ahead and seam that. And I think you guys have seen me do this before, but for those of you who haven't, or just as a refresher, this is how I'm going to do that. First of all, I'm going to lay my paper up next to it, and it's not quite the same cut, and it's never going to be quite the same cut because that's just the nature of how paper is, right? You know, the cuts aren't always going to line up perfectly. So we're going to do something to make them line up perfectly. The first thing I need to do is I need to cut this piece down to 6.5 so that I've got, you know, a piece I can work with here. And how I'm going to do that is on this trimmer is I'm going to go to the 5.5 inch mark and cut it. And then the leftover is going to be 6.5 inches, right? So now that I've got this piece at 6.5, I'm going to overlap them by about 1/4 of an inch. Okay. Just going to come in here, overlap them. I'm going to take a piece of my double-sided or my repositionable tape, and I'm going to place that on the right side over where I've overlapped that. Okay. So if you see here, I've got a bit of an overlap, and then I've placed my tape on there. Okay. Then I'm going to take it over to my paper trimmer, and I'm going to cut through both layers of that overlap. I'm going to make a straight cut right through where those two papers overlap on each other, and essentially giving me an identical cut. I'm going to have an identical cut to both pieces of papers when I go to join them. So now that I've made that cut, I'm going to peel this back. So I cut off this piece off of one of them, and then I cut off this piece off the other one, okay? But now when I line them up, the cut should be perfect. So now I've got a much tighter seam, and so I'm going to just take this piece of repositionable tape again, you know, one of the ones that was cut in the process, right? And I'm going to place it back on the front side, pressing them right up next to each other. Place that tape on here, just right over that seam, okay? Turn it over, take some double-sided tape. I'm going to go over that joint, making sure I've got a little tape on either side of that joint, connecting them both. Bring my double-sided tape down just like that. There we go. And now I have a piece that is joined, you know, pretty close to perfectly. Now, if you don't like the fact that there is going to be a little bit of a joint showing on here, then that's where we can come in with the Love from Lizzie peel-offs, and we can cover that up. But for the most part, you know, you can't really tell. Let's go ahead and use the peel-offs because I feel like I can tell on this one. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm just going to grab one of these, and I'm going to go over it right on top of the seam, right at that joint. And now you really can't tell. Like it's it's just going to be turned into a design element here. I'm going to trim off these tape edges. There we go. Trim those off. And you can also do that with, you know, a piece of ribbon. You could do it with a corresponding piece of cardstock, or you don't have to do it at all. You really don't have to do this at all. It's just a way to make it work. You could just use a new piece of, you know, cardstock and cut it from that. It's fine. I'm just trying to be extra frugal with this one, so it's how I want to do it. Now, I would like for this to be centered. On the other one, it wasn't, and I feel like it might look nice if it were centered. It's roughly 6.5 by 6.5. I was able to get that using my scraps. I'm going to try to turn it into a design element, and I'm happy with it. I think it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and pull off the backing, put the glue on, and stick it down. All right, now we've got some cardstock on our front and back cover. Let's go ahead and work on the decorative elements next. This collection has these large 6x6 cut-aparts as, you know, one of the pages in the collection. So I chose to use this one that says, "Let the Sea Set You Free," and we're going to use that one on our album. And on this one, I actually trimmed that cut apart down to just under 5 3/4. Let's see. Yeah, just under 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 inch square. And then I'm going to back it with a piece of mirrored cardstock, gold mirrored cardstock that's 5 7/8 by 5 7/8 inch square. And that's going to be it. And you guys that know me or have seen my other videos, you know that I typically do 3 or 4 or 5 different matting layers on different pieces, and I prefer that. But on this one, I just felt like there was already so much going on with the gold that it wasn't necessary. And I like the clean look of it on just for this particular one. So I am going to go ahead and trim this down. I'm going to get the gold backing piece cut as well. I'm also going to cut the cover for the spine, and the gold mirrored cardstock is 7/8 of an inch wide by 6 1/8 inch tall. And then that pattern piece in there measures 3/4 of an inch wide by 6 inches tall. So I'll have all those measurements then again in the cutting guide. And this is the mirrored cardstock that I'm using. It's also a Recollections paper. It is a foiled cardstock, and the color is matte gold. So that's the one that I'm using for these. I'm going to go ahead and get all of these cut and ink my edges and glued in place, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut, rounded the corners, inked the edges, and placed my sort of book plate here on the front. Now for the back, I want to use this really pretty little collection of shells that was on this piece of paper. And then I'm also going to use this sort of mottled blue edge here for the spine, because I just think it's really pretty. So if you see in this one, the back and the spine are larger in scale than this book plate on this one. This one's got a little bit more of a reveal of that around there, and that was intentional. I just thought that it was a nice style, and it was something I wanted to play around with. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this paper down, ink the edges, and attach it to our album as well. Okay, so that's it for my front and back cover and spine decoration. This one's really simple, and I like the clean lines of it, and I think it turned out really cute. And so yeah, I'm really happy with that. For the inside front cover of the album, I had placed one of the twist and pop elements that I typically do at the back of a book, but I just thought it worked out really well here on the front. And I used some of the cut aparts that were in the strip pieces, and I just cut them in half and layered them on here with this cardstock here, this kind of burlap, blue burlap looking cardstock. And I think it turned out really well. Let's go ahead and make that element right now. And the other thing that we're going to do, actually, before I do that, before we move on to making this element, I did use a single piece of paper across here. And the one I chose to use was this sort of beach into the waves image here. And so I'm going to show you how we cut that. The first thing we're going to have to address is the fact that the inside and outside covers are 6.5 by 6.5. The pages are only 6 1/4 by 6 1/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the larger size first. So I'm going to cut a piece here across the top that is 6.5 inches by 12 inches. Then we're gonna figure out, you know, we're gonna line this up so we can cut that. And then I'll trim a little bit off at the top and bottom. That way our image lines up and is consistent throughout. So let me go ahead and make that first cut and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've cut my page at 6.5 by 12. I'm gonna save this over here. And we are going to line it up and make our marks that we need to trim and cut from this first one here. So I cut it a little bit more, a little bit longer than it needed to be because I prefer that. It gives me a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm you know, again, I'm fitting this. I'm cutting it to fit. So I want to look and see, I want to cut it just inside of where that hinge, you know, moves so that it's not in the way, right? So it's not all the way over to that joint, but close to that joint. So I'm gonna make a little tick mark there. And my height, I'm gonna make a little tick mark down here. Make those first two cuts. I'm happy with it, but I think this cut is a little bit crooked. I'm not sure why. Let me double check. I might not have lined it up well. Yep, it's off by a little bit. So just I'm gonna cut that little sliver of a piece off. Again, lining it up. Yep, that looks good. I'm happy with it. I'm double checking to make sure that this is gonna move. It's not gonna be anywhere near that joint of that movement in there, so that it will, you know, not going to impede with the articulation on that. And that's all really good. I'm going to ink my edges and glue it down into place, and then we're going to use it as a fixed reference for how we're going to trim this other piece here. All right, now I've gone ahead and inked my edges and glued that down. It's time for me to address this piece here. And one of the things that I did on this one that I'm not sure I'm going to do again was I did cover a little bit of that gusset. It was super fussy. It was super fidgety. I'm not sure that it was worth it. It took a lot of different cuts and a lot of different things to get it in place. And I don't know that I necessarily need it. So instead, what I'm going to do on this one is I'm just going to line it up here so that I'm going to use the page as a reference. And once I have it, you know, essentially where I want it to be, you know, so it's lined up with that, I am going to make a couple tick marks at the top and the bottom so that I know where I need to trim it. So I need to trim a little off the top and a little off the bottom in order for this pattern to line up with the next page, because these pages are, like I said, they're shorter than the height of the book. So I'm going to trim this one and this one. I feel like I made that mark a little too short, so I'm going to trim on the outside of that mark. See how that works. Yep, that's going to work really well for us. So we now have this piece ready to attach. I don't have the pages on here that it's going to attach to yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slip it inside of this pocket for now. And that way I've got it in place. I've gone ahead and made those cuts. And now let's go ahead and move on to our inside front cover and that twist and pop element. And for the twist and pop element on the inside front cover, we're gonna need two pieces that measure 8.5 by 2 1/4, one piece that is 11 inches by 6. And then I've got another piece that's 6 inches tall by, oh gosh, this is like 2 1/4 inches wide. It doesn't need to be that wide. We'll trim it down some. So we're going to start off with our 11 inch by 6 inch piece of paper, and we're going to put it in our scoreboard, and we're going to score it at 6 inches. And then we're going to fold and burnish on that score mark. And once we've got that folded and burnished, we need to create a little extension here. We're 1 inch short on how long we need this back piece of this fold to be. So just like I did with the pages, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to come over it with that other piece, and we're going to trim it down to size to make it fit. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one down so that it is about 1.5 inches by 6 inches. So now I've got a piece that's 1.5 inches by 6 inches, just like we did for our pages, just how we created that extension for the pages. And if it's over a little bit, I don't care. I'd rather trim it than, you know, trim it so that it's an exact fit than have to try to, you know, make something work that wasn't straight. I'd rather trim it, is what I'd say. I'd rather it be too long and trim it back. And again, this is probably just the trim carpenter in me talking, but it's how I've always done it. And I get a good fit when I do that. Okay, so we're gonna fold this over, press it down, and we've now created an extension piece on our fold. And this is essentially a card. I mean, it could be a standalone card. It's just a card that we're attaching on the inside of our album. So, you know, and that's a lot of what I like to do in my album page elements is, you know, take from some card designs and apply them in that way. So now I do have a little bit hanging over here. I'm going to trim that up. Okay, now that I've got that all trimmed up, we're good to go. Our folded size measures 6 by 6, and that is going to be the base for our twist and pop element. Now on to the two pieces that measure 8.5 by 2 1/4. We're going to get out our scoreboard, and on one of them, we're going to score it in half lengthwise and in half widthwise. So with the 2 1/4 inch part at the top, I'm going to score it at 1 1/8. All the way down. And with the 8.5 inch part at the top, we're going to score it at 4 1/4. Then we're going to fold and burnish our score marks. And as you can see, we've created kind of like a cross here. We're half lengthwise and half widthwise. The next step we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to sort of twist fold this so that we can make an X. Right now we've got like a plus sign in the middle here, and we're going to make an X through that plus sign. And how we're going to do that is we're going to match up this fold mark to this fold mark. And so I'm just going to twist this over here, make sure that's matching up, flip it over, make sure that this fold mark is also matching up. And once I've got that where I want it to be, I'm just going to give it a little pinch. And I twisted it a little bit. There we go. Go ahead and burnish that down. Double check to make sure that we're straight, and we are off by a little bit. There we go. And then, so we've got one line through that little X in the middle, or the cross in the middle. We're starting our X. And now we're going to do the other one the same way, where we're going to match up those fold marks with each other. Give it a firm burnishing. I got glue on there. So we end up with this piece that looks like this, where we've got a cross here, fold in the center, you can see. And then we've also got these X's that are folded like that, okay? And what we're going to do is we're just going to squeeze the pieces together so that these folds fold to the inside. And then they're going to come together like this, make a point, and it sort of looks like a house. I've heard it described as a house. I've heard it described as an arrow. However you want to describe it. This is the mechanism that we're looking for, is something that's going to fold up like this. Now, I have only one time have I done this and had these both come out even, and it was actually in one of the tutorials I've had. If you can see here, they're not quite lining up, and that's just the process of the folding. That's what's going to end up happening, and we can just trim that off. Grab my trimmer, place it in here, and then I'm just going to trim that tiny, tiny, tiny little bit off so that my legs here are even with each other. And then the other one, I'm not even going to bother scoring it. I have in past tutorials, but it really doesn't matter. I just need to fold it in half lengthwise. And then once I've got it folded in half lengthwise, I'm going to take each of the sides and I'm going to meet them up to that center fold. And essentially I'm getting a series of folds that are valley, mountain, valley, right? But I just think it's easier to just fold it than to bother with scoring it and folding it. I don't know why. I just think it's easier. There you go. So now we have something like this that is valley, mountain, valley, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to round the edges on these corners. You don't have to. I just like the way it looks. So I like to fold it all up so I've got all 4 layers together. I'm going to go around it one time like that. And then I'm going to sort of open it up and I'm going to do sets of 2 at a time just to get the other little, you know, if there's little burrs or something like that in there. Fold it like this, do the 2 at a time, and then do the last kind of little pass over here 2 at a time. Okay, so once I've got those rounded, then I'm gonna round the corners on the outside edge of the bottom of these legs, okay? So on this edge and this edge, I'm gonna round the corner. Not the edge, this doesn't have a fold. See this little part here? I'm gonna round these corners here. There's no fold here. That's, you know, two pieces coming together. I'm not rounding the part of the fold. I'm just rounding the other part. Okay, and now that I've got those rounded, we can go ahead and start assembling our twist and pop element here together. So what's gonna happen is this is gonna open up, okay? So that the triangles are kind of at the bottom and these folds are pointing up on the side pieces here, okay? So the folds are pointing up, and then we've got this one, valley, mountain, valley. So you want the mountain in the middle, right? And I'm gonna place a small dollop of glue up here in this upper third, top to bottom wise, on this left-hand side over here towards the edge. I'm gonna take one of my pieces here, again, valley, mountain, valley. I'm gonna stick it on top, and I'm gonna line it up so that my edges are all lined up. The reason I like this method is that these two pieces are cut to the exact same size, so it always lines up perfectly. You don't have to worry about anything getting off in your folds or anything like that. Once you go to glue it down, it's just gonna line up perfectly. And now I'm gonna come over here to this other side, and in the bottom third, from top to bottom, the bottom lower third here, I'm gonna put another little dollop of glue, and I'm gonna lay this down, making sure that my edges are all lined up again, right? I'll lay this one down on here and give it a little burnishing. Make sure I got that glue spread around there. And now when we go to squeeze this, like we had before, this is gonna fold up just perfectly where I've got one leg on the top and one leg on the bottom, and my my section of 4 there is all just kind of enclosed in place. And so when it opens up, it's gonna flip open, you know, like this. See? And so that is just what we want it to look like. Once we've made this little piece here, this tip, this very tip here, I like to trim that down because you have a whole lot of paper folded up in a small little area there, and I think it's just a little bit too bulky. So I'm trimming off a tiny little piece here. Well, I was gonna show you the piece I trimmed off, but I can't find it. So here you go. Now you can sort of see how I just trimmed off the tip there. Can you see that? Just the very tip. That's all I did. And that way it's not gonna be too bulky up there in that edge. All right, let's go ahead and get our pattern pieces cut for this. For this one, I'm using this blue ombre burlap print. I'm actually gonna use this as the covering for not only the front cover, but also the insides as well. And I'm gonna be able to get that all out of one piece and still have a, you know, just over 6 by 6 square left over. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut those now. On the front cover, I'm gonna use some of these cut aparts here. And the one that I chose to use is The Ocean is Calling. I thought that was really pretty, and it just lays out really well on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that one out, but I'm also gonna cut out this one here because this little sort of decorative element is what I use to put in between the ocean and the is calling portion. So I'm gonna cut both of those back out, and then I'll show you how I put those on here. So I've got my little pieces here that I've cut out, and I'm just trying to sort of center them on here as best I can. You're trying to center out the words, and then I'm gonna attach this one here in the middle as well. And notice I've got some overhang here. I'm not worried about that. I'll trim it up when I'm done. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm fitting it on here correctly. I think that's good. First, I'm gonna ink my edges, at least the top and the bottom. I'm trimming the sides. I can ink those after the fact. Okay, we've got that on in place, and I am happy with the way it's looking. Let's go ahead and trim it. I had some glue seeping out there. Let's go ahead and trim that one and this one. There we go. And now all I need to do is ink the edges of all of this, and that'll get the edges here of the sides that I just trimmed as well. And we're gonna attach it to the top of our little card, of our 6 by 6 card that we're using to put the Twist and Pop element in. And see, it's just gonna get glued right onto here, and it fits really nicely. I'm very happy with the way this is looking. It's super cute. Okay, so that's the front. And now when it opens up, we're gonna need to go ahead and put our paper on the inside. But before I do that, I need to attach a magnet right in here. And I'm gonna put a little piece of ribbon as almost like a pull tab. Not necessarily because you need to open it that way. In fact, I usually don't. I usually just sort of grab the paper and open it, but it lets people know, oh, there's something behind here. And so a lot of times I like to include that more just as a indicator that there's something to pull than anything else. So let's go ahead and do that. I want to center my magnet here, and I want to come down about 1/2 inch from the edge. So once I've got that where I want it to be, I'm just going to take a piece of double-sided tape and place it down. Okay. And then now for the little pull tab portion, all I do is I take about a 2-inch section of, or not even 2 inches, like maybe 1.5 inches or so. I'm just going to take a little bit of this ribbon. Okay. And then I'm going to fold it in half and create a little crease here. And then I'm going to apply some tape. I'm going to wrap tape around it. And that way I've found that it's a lot easier to position small things that are slippery, like this ribbon, if I'm doing that. So I'm going to hold it in place here, and I'm going to come just inside of the 1/2 inch mark, you know, so I'm coming about 1/2 inch down. And it's not exact. It doesn't have to be exact. And I wrap it around just like that. Okay. There we go. And then I'm going to trim it down to about 1/4 inch, maybe less, maybe closer to 1/8 inch. I'm not sure. I'm going to peel off this tape that I've kind of wrapped around here with. There we go. And now I have a little unit that I can position on here for my pull tab. So let's kind of center this again. I know I want it to be about like that. I'm going to have it come out 1/4 inch from the bottom. So I've got that lined up there, and it's just really nice to use your, you know, your work surface here to do that with. I'm going to peel off this tape, and I'm just going to kind of cover over this a little bit more. That's a big lump that we're creating, and I just want to kind of smooth it out a little bit with another little piece of tape. And then I've got my pieces that are covering the inside here. I want to try to line up this ombre effect. Let's see if I can kind of remember where it was. I think it was like this. Yeah, that looks about right. I think, yeah, that looks about right. So because I've got this ombre effect and because I want it to line up correctly, I am going to write top and bottom on these. So that one I know goes to the top. This one is going to go to the bottom. And that way, at least I've got them lined up correctly. I'm going to ink my edges and glue both of them down. Okay, so I'm going to test something out here. If I put all my layers in, meaning I've got my bottom piece and I've got my Twist and Pop element, and I'm going to close it up, I'm just going to test and see if one of my other magnets, if it's going to be strong enough to hold from the bottom. I'm not sure. It will be, but see how there's a gap in here? I'm thinking if I use the 2mm magnet on the inside, it's going to be better because it's going to end up being similar to the same thickness as the paper. So I'm thinking I want the magnet on the inside. So let's go ahead and attach that one down too. And how I do that is I'm just going to take a piece of tape. So this is the magnet we've already put down. It's underneath the paper. I'm going to let that magnet find out, you know, where it needs to go to grab. I'm going to put the tape sticky side up and put the magnet back on there, close it back down, press on both of the sides where that tape overhangs so that it sticks in just the right spot. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of burnish around that too, because this is a thicker magnet than this one. This one up here was a 10 by 1mm magnet, and this is a 10 by 2mm magnet. Okay, so I've attached my magnet. You can see where the magnet is. I got this wet. It will dry. It'll look better. But it's going to be fine. That's not what people are going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at the Twist and Pop element. So let's go ahead and attach that. Let me show you how to do that. We're going to center it left to right. So it's going to be placed in the center of the of the card, and we're going to scooch it up all the way as if, pretend that that tip was still there, and pretend that the tip touches the center of the fold. So we need to scooch it up just a little bit so that if it were still there, that angle would come up to the very tip, the very center here of this fold, okay? And then once we've got it right where we want it, we're going to put glue on this triangle piece here, just like this. And again, not a lot of glue, but a lot of coverage. And then we're going to close it up and just sort of give it a little bit of a burnishing right there. Make sure that glue is all spread out where it needs to be. Turn it over, open it up again, and then we're going to put glue on the back side of the triangle. And that's it. I'm going to let this set for a little bit so that the glue can dry all the way, because it does pull on it quite a bit when you open it. So I really want that glue to cure. And then I will open it up and show you what it looks like. Okay, so now we've let that set for a little bit, and when you open it up, as you can see, it just pops right out. Isn't that fun? Oh my gosh, I love these. I could just make these all the time. I think they're just super fun. Okay, so I'm grabbing my book, and we're gonna bring that back over here. And it is just going to get glued right here on the inside front cover. Now, I could center it like this, but I'm going to have this hanging down a little bit. So I'm actually going to go more to the top than to the bottom, just so that it centers in here, including the little pull tab that we made there. And how do we do this? We're just putting glue all over the back. Yep, that's it. Going to glue the whole back side of this and then stick it down. Okay, now once we've got our glue on there, I'm just going to hold it up here, kind of see where it is that I want to put it down, and press it into place. I think we're doing good here. Make sure we're not hitting anything with this edge here, and I'm not, and it's perfect. I'm really happy with it. I like to open it up and give it a pressing from the inside, just to make sure I've got good contact everywhere, up inside of the triangle of the twist and pop included, and all around here. You can see this one's trying to lift up because I've got a lot of, there's a lot of bulk here with this magnet, but I think that magnet is necessary. You know, it's got to raise up enough to go past the added layers of all of this folded paper that we've got in here. Close that one down, burnish this really well. Shine down. Okay, I'm really happy with that. Isn't that just too cute? Ta-da! I'm loving it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and work on page 1. Now, page 1 and page 5 are identical. So when I cut the pieces, I cut them for both pages, and I'm going to prepare them for both pages at the same time because it just saves time, and it sort of is how my brain works. You don't have to do that if you don't want. But I do want to walk through how I number my pages. So even though there's only 3 pages on 3 hinges, I number them like this. The front side of the first page is page 1. The back side is page 2. The front side of the second page is page 3. The back side is page 4. The front side of the third page is page 5. And the back side is page 6. So when you look at the cutting guide, it's going to have pages 1 through 6, and that's how they're going to correspond. So for pages 1 and 5, we have one piece that measures 6 1/4 by 6 1/8. And we have one piece that measures 6 1/4 by 6 3/8. I know they're weird measurements. It's just how it lays out on the page, and that's just how I made them. So for the 6 1/4 by 6 1/8 piece, that's 6 1/8, that's 6 1/4. We're going to score it on the 6 1/8 inch side at 1/2 inch. And how I like to do it, because I'm right-handed and it's hard for me to get in over here, is I bring it back 1/2 inch. So at 6 1/8, right, we're at the 6 1/8 by 6 1/4. On the 6 1/8 inch side, I'm just going to count back 1/2 inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I'm going to score it at 5 5/8 on the 6 1/8 inch side. And I'm going to do that for the piece for page 1 and for page 5, because like I said, those are identical. On the 2 pieces that measure 6 1/4 by 6 3/8, I'm going to put it in on the 6 3/8 inch side. And again, I'm going to score it at 1/2 inch, or in my case, I'm going to back it down 1/2 inch because it's just easier for me to score from the right side since I'm right-handed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that puts me at 5 7/8, or half if it's easier for you. And then I'm going to fold and burnish those. And you can round the edges if you like. I didn't in this book, so, you know, it's completely up to you, whatever you prefer to do. You're going to take the larger of the 2 pieces and you're going to place it on the bottom and the shorter one on the top. Place some glue on the back side of this 1/2 inch little tab here, and I'm going to glue it directly on top of the other piece. And then we're going to attach both of them together with the 1/2 inch tab that's on the larger piece. Now that I've gone ahead and attached my pages and I've got 2 separate units here, I'm going to set one of them aside for page 5, and we're going to go ahead and attach the one for page 1 on, well, page 1, right? And it's simply going to get attached right here. And it's going to come in. It's not going to be all the way on the edge of the page because I'm going to have a hard time with it moving like that. And that's why I had the kind of odd measurements. And that's because I wanted to be able to have an even reveal here on these after I scooted it in some, and it just worked out like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put some glue here on this back tab and place this where it needs to go. All right, so we've got that one in place, and now I can go ahead and start putting this piece on. The way I had planned, I can see where I need to mark my cut, and I might actually be able to put it on one of these other gusset pieces. I don't know. We'll see after I go ahead and make my mark. But I'm going to just make a little tick mark here on where I need to cut that off. Get my paper trimmer, trim that down. It's roughly at 5 1/2 inches is where it lays out to be. Go ahead and place that on here. I like the reveal that it's giving me all the way around. I think it looks super good. And then, I don't know, do I want to place this piece on here? Let's see. I mean, I could. I certainly could. I might. Let's go ahead and glue that one down. I just think it looks kind of nice. It sort of carries that pattern on through. I'm going to erase some of these pencil marks, ink my edges, glue them down, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm really happy with how that looks. I think it was nice to put that little sliver on there, and it still, you know, it opens and closes just fine. I don't have any issues with it, and I think it looks really pretty. So let's go ahead and move on to these other flaps here, which are basically sort of faux pages, right? They're attaching onto the page, but they operate as if they were their own standalone page. And I just need to cover them. Good thing about if you get glue on the mirrored part is you can sort of just rub it off, you know, with a soft cloth. So I'm going to go ahead and put some paper on these. Let me cut those pieces. I'll be right back. So I've trimmed down some of my paper to 6 1/8 inch high so that it will fit here on this 6 1/4 inch page. And I'm just going to lay it out here across these pages. Sometimes it's hard to see, you know, where the page begins and ends because of all of the paper is, you know, matching. And so if you stick a contrasting piece of paper underneath it, you can sort of see what that reveal is going to look like. And I'm really happy with that. And because I want this to be a continuous print across here, but I need to make a cut, you know, in the middle where that seam is, I'm just going to lay it down here like that, sort of peek where I need it to be, and then make a little tick mark. I'm going to move the tick mark to the other side of that, you know, that seam of that hinge where it needs to be able to move. And then I'll make another tick mark over here where I need to cut that. A couple quick cuts later, I'm going to dry fit and make sure that it's, you know, sitting where I need it to sit. And that is looking really good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and ink my edges and glue them down. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with this piece here where I'm going to lay it out, make my tick mark, scooch it on the other side of that fold or that little hinge there, make my other tick mark, cut them, ink them, glue them down, and I'll be right back. Our inside cover and page 1 are now complete. We have our sweet little twist and pop over here, and then we've got our little faux pages that are on top of page 1. And now we're ready for pages 2 and 3. In my prototype over here, I've got pages 2 and 3 as these kind of pull out pages like this. I chose to use this sentiment off of a large 12 by 12 layout page so that that would read across there. And I'm gonna cut that in the same way that I have cut all my other ones, where I basically, you know, wanna fit it specifically to the pages. But in this case, I need to cut my 6 1/4 inch high by 12 inch long piece out of the center of the page, because I've got this, you know, this writing is centered on the page. And how I was able to do that is I simply, you know, found the center of the page, and then I went 3 1/8 inch above it and 3 1/8 inch below it. So I took it to my paper trimmer, I placed it at the 6 inch mark over here, so that would be the center, and then I scooted it over 3 1/8 inch so that I could make that first cut, and then flipped it around, and then from there I could measure the 6 1/4 inches to go ahead and make that cut. So I'm gonna go make those cuts and I'll be right back. And now that I've gone ahead and cut out my sentiment, I'm going to use my small paper trimmer, and I'm gonna do kind of a similar thing here, right? So I'm gonna go to the 6 inch mark, and I know that that would be the center of the page. And I know that I've got a gusset in the middle of here that is 3/8 of an inch wide. So I need a 1/4 of an inch piece of paper, a paper that's a 1/4 of an inch wide, to cover that gusset there in the center. And how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna go to the 6 inch mark, and then I'm gonna back it off 1/8 of an inch to 5 7/8, make that cut. Then I'm gonna take my other piece and, you know, flipping it over, I'm gonna put it at the 5 7/8 inch mark and make that cut. And that's gonna leave me with a 1/4 of an inch strip that was cut from the very center of that piece. And that is just the easiest way that I found to be able to do that. And so these are then gonna lay across that in this manner. I've gotten a little ahead of myself, I just realized. I haven't attached my flaps yet. So now that I've made these cuts, I'm just gonna stack these up and set them off to the side. And we're gonna go ahead and assemble the actual pages, the flaps that go on the pages of pages 2 and 3. And for pages 2 and 3, we've got 2 pieces that measure 4 1/2 by 6 1/4, and 2 pieces that measure 5 1/2 by 6 1/4. We're gonna score each of them at a 1/2 inch on the 5 1/2 inch side and on the 4 1/2 inch side. Once they've been folded and burnished, we're gonna attach them like this. We're gonna attach the that 1/2 inch flap on the 4 1/2 inch piece that's now folded down to 4 inches wide. We're gonna attach that on the top of the piece, not on the same side as the flap, but on the opposite side of the flap. So I've got the flap here, it's gonna fold in, and then I'm gonna put this one on here. And that's gonna create kind of an accordion type fold once we get those connected. So I'm gonna glue those down, I'll be right back. And now we've attached them like this, right? And so they're gonna get glued into our book now. And this flap that's on the larger piece, so we've got the smaller piece attached on top opposite the flap that's on the bottom of the larger piece. That one is gonna get glued on the right-hand side of page 3. And this flap here is gonna get glued on the left-hand side of page 2. And that is how that's gonna work. So I'm gonna glue those down. And now that we've got those glued down, I do wanna point out that I like to put some clamps on the edges here when I glue that down, and that helps keep it really straight while that glue is sort of setting, so that it's not pulling away from the sides. Like I said, it likes to expand once it gets that glue in those fibers, and we just want to hold them in place. And it doesn't take long. It's just long enough to basically, for that glue to set. And then I just take the clamps off, and then I've got a nice straight edge there still. So once we've got all of that done, I need to put some magnets in place, because these are being held in place with magnets. And I think I'm gonna use these. So I'm gonna center on the back side of this one. I'm gonna find, do I wanna center it? I'm debating. I think I actually wanna offset them. So I think on this one, I'm gonna come up a little bit, because if they're in the same position on both sides, then it's gonna create a lot of bulk in that one spot. So I'm actually gonna come up a little bit, about a 1/2 inch in, 3/4 to a 1/2 inch in, and I'm just going to attach a magnet right here, okay? And then on the back side, once that catches where it needs to be, I'm going to do the same thing where I put the tape. You see me looking for my tape. I'm gonna put the tape on the back side of that magnet, sticky side up. Go ahead and close it, press the sides. When I open it back up again, it's now attached. And then we'll take another magnet over here. I'm gonna offset again. And then this way I also don't have to worry about the polarity and the fact that they might grab each other. These magnets are offset, so it's gonna be just fine. Go ahead and stick that one down. Get a larger magnet to go on the back. Whoops, there we go. Put some tape on it. Make sure that's all straight. Press it down, lift it up. I've got it positioned exactly where it needs to be. And now we're good to go. And these pages aren't gonna be extra bulky because I've offset those magnets. So they're still gonna close up pretty tight to each other actually, considering that I've got, you know, a thick magnet in there as well. So I think that's pretty good. So now I can move on to these pieces that I just cut. And to place them, first I want to make sure that my top to the bottom is right. That all looks really good. And they're simply going to get glued into place just like this. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the center piece first so that I can then make sure that these are all lined up even with it. Let me ink my edges and get those glued down, and I will be right back. Okay, I've gone ahead and cut my other pieces here. I've got two that are 4 7/8 by the 6 1/8. I've got two that are 3 7/8 by 6 1/8, and then two other ones that are 3 7/8 by 6 1/8. Now, I wanted to address this piece that goes on here, and that was with these shells, okay? And what I'm gonna do with that, because I want the same sort of reveal on each side, I'm actually gonna cut it from each side of it. So what I mean by that is this is 5 inches across. I'm gonna cut it to 4 7/8, and I'm cutting from the left side of my paper, right? That can sit like that. And then I'm gonna flip it over so that I'm essentially cutting from the right side of the paper, and I'm gonna go to 4 7/8. And just because the way this pattern lines up, that means I'm gonna have a similar type of a reveal on each side. In fact, if I flip them, I'll have a row of whole shells on each side, and I think that that looks really nice. I hope that made sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and ink all my edges, glue them down. I'm gonna attach the other little pull tab that I've put together here with the ribbon on the other one as well. I'm gonna get all those down and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we've got all of our papers on our flip outs here, and I think it looks really great. We have one issue, and that is that even though we use this 12-inch wide paper, it doesn't come all the way over. So I'm gonna cut a couple strips of paper on here. I'm gonna mark it, cut it, ink it, glue it down, cover it with a peel off. You guys know the drill by now, right? All right, so now pages 2 and 3 are complete, and I think it looks super cute. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Let's see, can you guys see all of that? I'll go like that. Yep, super cute. Let's move on to pages 4 and 5. If you remember, we already attached the kind of faux pages, this little, you know, top flaps here for page 5. So that's going to be super easy. I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. And then on page 4, we're going to need two pieces that measure 6 1/8 by 4 1/4. And the reason it's 6 1/8 instead of 6 1/4, because we know the pages are 6 1/4 inch wide and tall, right? I need it to back it off away from the edge here, so that when this opens and closes, the edge doesn't catch there in the gusset as the page is trying to, you know, move mechanically the way it needs to. So I want to back that down by 1/8 of an inch, and I'm actually going to line it up with the edge of the page. So I'm not going to center it with 1/8 of an inch short. I'm going to scooch it all the way over here to the edge, and it's going to look great, and that's just how we're going to do that one. These two pieces that measure 4 1/4 by 6 1/8, they really, if you were cutting it from 12 by 12 cardstock or you weren't looking to conserve paper, they really probably should be 4.5 by 6 1/8, because typically I have a 1/2 inch connection on here. But since these were cut from an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I brought it down to 4 1/4 inches. So we're gonna have a 1/4 of an inch fold attachment on these instead of our usual 1/2 inch, and it's going to be totally fine. Structurally, there's not going to be any issue with it. If you would rather cut them to 4.5, that's just fine. We're going to score them at 4 inches on the 4 1/4 inch side here, and this really has been helping me to take this sort of thinner side along there. Just helps me get a more exact line to fold and burnish on. There we go. And I know it looks weird, and I know it's not what we're used to doing, but I promise it's going to be just fine. I am going to go ahead and round the edges on these. I know I haven't been rounding a lot of other edges, but I just feel like since this is a top bottom, and with it, the potential of that sharp point catching in the hinge, I just don't want that to happen, so. And it probably wouldn't, but I'm just rounding them. I rounded them on the other one, so that's what I'm doing. So now that we've got those all ready, let's go ahead and glue them down here onto our page. And like I said, we're gonna have flush at the top, flush on the side. It is gonna be a little bit of room over here on this side, but that's okay. That's exactly what we want. So I'm gonna apply some glue and put it down. Now, I will say this. In dealing with this 1/4 of an inch attachment instead of a 1/2 inch attachment, it's pretty important that you use some clamps or something to hold it in place. You just don't have as much surface area. So I am definitely going to clamp these and wait just a little bit, you know, a minute, maybe a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes before I remove them, so that I can ensure that I've got good contact on the area that we do have to attach. So I'm going to pull the tag out here and line it up. I hope my head's not in the way. But I'm trying to line this up at the very top of the page and the very edge of the page. And once I've got it lined up, I'm just going to give it a quick little burnishing. Make sure I'm still in place on where I want it to be. And then I'm going to take my clips and I'm going to quickly run along this edge with my clips just to make sure that, that I've got good contact. And while I'm letting that sit, I'm going to go ahead and put the glue on this one, and then we'll just move the clips from the top one to the bottom one when we're ready. Okay, and now we're going to line this up with the bottom of the page, and again, this left-hand side. Make sure that I'm straight along here on all sides. Looking good. Quick little rub down. Pull off these clips and start moving them down here. And while that's sitting, I'm going to put my glue on this page unit here, and we're going to attach that to page 5 in the exact same way that we did for page 1. All right, now that has set and we've got our page unit attached to page 5. We're ready to go ahead and start putting some papers on here. Well, actually before that, I do want to attach one magnet on here. That's not going to, I was always trying to see if there's one on the bottom that's going to be competing with it, and there's not. So I'm going to go with my thinner magnets here for sure. There's no reason for me to do a big heavy magnet. And I'm just going to find the center-ish. I'm just going to sort of eyeball where the center is on this. Put some tape on it, attach my corresponding magnet. So I know you guys have seen me do this like a million times before, but I am going to go over it one more time, and that is how I'm going to cut this so that it looks like it's a continuous piece of paper. Because if I lay it on top of this top, you know, sort of faux page that's on here, you can tell that I've got some, you know, a ways to go over here. But we're going to make up for that in the gaps between where I attach the page and then the gaps between each side of the gusset, and it really does work out just right. So I'm going to lay this on here, giving myself a little bit of a reveal around the edge, you know, not too much, but a little bit of a reveal around the edge. And once I've got that where I want it to be, I'm going to make a little mark just like we have been before. I'm going to scooch it over to inside of the gusset. I know that I'm going to need 1/4 of an inch inside the gusset here, so I may just do that on my trimmer, but I'm going to go ahead and make the mark anyway. And then that should line up, as you can see, where I've got plenty of paper here for this page too. So it's going to just work out perfectly. I'm going to make those cuts. I'm also going to make the cuts for the other pages here in the same way that I have before, lining it up, marking it, scooching it over, marking it again, and then I'll meet you right back here in just a minute. All right, I've gone ahead and glued all of my papers down onto my pages over here, and then I've got this one down as well. But I want to go ahead and put something here on the top and then also on the bottom. And what I've chosen to do is I've chosen to use this cut apart here to go on the front here. And so I need to trim that down so that it will fit. And then on the inside, what I had done was attach this one here. So I need to trim it down to the right, you know, length, width, all of that stuff. And then I'm just going to go ahead and glue that one down as well. I'm going to make those cuts, ink the edges, yada, yada, yada. You guys know how this goes. And I'll be right back. All right, we now have our pages covered. And I think they turned out really cute. So we've got page 4 here, page 5 with their little kind of faux pages that make it seem like there's more. And we are in the home stretch. All right, so now for page 6. On page 6, we just have a pocket, and that piece is cut to 6 1/4 by 5 1/2. We're going to score it a 1/2 inch on the left side and a 1/2 inch on the bottom. So I've scored a 1/2 inch on the left and the bottom, right? And then what I'm going to do is fold and burnish those. And then I'm going to miter my corners here. So if you guys can see that square that happens, you know, when I folded each of those sides, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to, right at that, where the fold line comes into that fold from the other side, I'm just going to place them there to start off with, and then I'm going to give it a clip. Okay. And then I'm going to bring that side in, and I'm going to do the same thing over here where I'm just going to hold my scissors in that corner and give it a little clip. And that's going to give me a nice little miter here for this edge. And then we're going to make a couple marks here. I'm going to come back, how far did I come back on this? Yep, 1/2 inch. Okay, so I've got my folded edges here on the left side and the bottom. I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to mark over a 1/2 inch at the top from the left. So starting on the left-hand side, I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch over to the right on the top. And I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch up on the right-hand side from the bottom. Okay. And once I've made those 2 marks, then I'm just going to get my paper trimmer out again here. And I'm going to line up those marks on the edge of my paper trimmer. And I'm going to make a cut from one mark to the other. And once I've got that, then that's going to give me the shape that I want for my pocket piece here. So I've got up and 1/2 inch and over a 1/2 inch for that pocket. And now when we lay this on here, we can see how that's going to work out. Now I'm not going to attach my pocket yet. I'm actually going to cover it with paper on the front, and I'm going to put the background paper behind it so that you won't have anything catching on these attachment pieces for our pocket. It's going to be very smooth on the inside. Okay, so for this back page here, if you'll notice, I used the same pattern paper on the background as I did to cover this part, the front page, and then these subsequent little pieces here on my pull down waterfall pieces, right? But I didn't want to waste this paper. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut a center piece out of it. So I'm not going to put my pieces on here or on any of this thing with the pull down waterfall, which we're going to build here in a minute yet. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the piece for the back here, and then I'm going to cut out the center portion. And that way I can use that center portion on another area here in my construction. It's just a way that I'm going to conserve paper. So what I'm going to start off with is I want to place this piece here on the back right? And so I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to mark it just like I have with everything else so that I know exactly where I want to make my cuts. Looks like I've cut this a little bit long. I need to cut like a 1/16 of an inch off there. And then I'm just looking to see where my edge is, where this is going to bend up, right? It's going to be about there. About right? Yep, that's about right. So I'm going to go ahead and make those cuts really quick. All right, now I'm going to lay it out here, make sure that it fits. And that looks good. I like the way that's looking here. Let me make sure. Get my head in the picture, sorry. Okay, so yes, I like the way that looks. Now what I need to do is I'm going to need to cut around this. So I'm going to turn the paper over, okay? And I'm going to mark that this is the bottom. And I need to come up 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. And I'm going to make a mark. Okay. And then on each side here, I'm going to mark the sides at 1/4 of an inch in. And that's a good chunk of paper, right? I mean, that's a pretty decent piece of paper that I'm going to be left with here that's cut out of the center. And we're going to be able to use that to cover our waterfall pieces. And it's just a really nice way to conserve paper. This is all going to get covered up anyway. You're never going to see it. There's no reason to have your good paper back here where you can't even see it. And now that we've made our marks around there, I'm simply going to take my finger blade and my metal ruler, and I'm going to lay it right along the edge of the lines that I just drew. And I'm going to take my blade and I'm just going to draw it right down there and cut on all 4 of these lines. And now I've got my background piece and I've cut the centerpiece out of here. And if we look over here, you can see that I'm going to be able to use that centerpiece that I cut out to cover the pocket. And that's going to be fantastic because that's going to give me extra paper that, you know, I would have normally just been hidden underneath everything, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ink my edges. I probably should have done that before I cut the center out. It would have been easier. All right, now I've inked my edges and I'm simply going to glue this piece down. All right, now we've glued that one down. I can go ahead and use this page here to cover the pocket here. It looks like I'm going to need to trim it down just a little bit on the height here. And so let's go ahead and make our marks on where that needs to be trimmed. Looks like the width as well. Pencil, let's see, just a hair up here, but quite a bit over here. Let's make those cuts and then we'll make our marks for our angled cut. So now that that fits, I've gone ahead and made some tick marks where I need to begin my angle cut. And I'm going to make it the exact same way I did for making the pocket, where I'm going to line up each one of those marks on my cutting edge and then slice it. Let's dry fit and make sure it fits. Yep, that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and ink these edges and glue it down as well. All right, now we've got our pocket piece covered and I think that looks really nice. And we've done all of that out of this single piece of paper, so that's pretty great. All right, I've got a piece that is 6 1/8 by 6 1/8, and that's gonna be what's gonna cover page 6. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ink my edges. Let's do that first. The inking of the edges, that's just, oh my goodness. I'm getting kind of punchy right now. I don't know. This is what procrastination does to me. All right, so then this is going to slip inside of our pocket piece that we've created here. And I'm going to lay it on and just kind of do a dry fit first, make sure that everything is going to work out well. And I think that looks great. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm pushing it into this corner of the pocket, right? I'm pushing it all the way in there. Then I'm opening it up and I'm going to glue these flaps onto the paper before I glue everything then onto the page. And that way, as I'm pushing things in and out, they're never going to get caught on on these little, you know, flaps that we've used to create our pocket. Everything's going to slide in really well. And then I'm gluing it all down as a singular unit. We're just going to glue it all on the page right now at the same time. And then we just put glue on the back of the page and the edges of the pocket that have been wrapped around to the back and stick it down. And that is just easy peasy lemon squeezy. Get some more glue on here. And I am going to clamp these because we've got kind of a bulky thing that's going down. So I do want to make sure that I clamp those edges really well around the pocket, right? I just want to make sure that they are well adhered. Okay, so pressing it up to the edge on both sides. Making sure that we've got everything laying down the way it's supposed to. I'm going to give it a quick burnishing and then I'm going to start putting my clamps on. I'm going to make sure that I burnish the rest of this page that's not going to be clamped. And then I'm going to come down here and just start sticking them in place. Actually, just slide it a little bit. Okay. Our pocket is in place. Everything is looking really good. And I think it's time for us to go ahead and move on to the pull down waterfall. This is really fun. All right, for the inside back cover, we're going to do a pull down waterfall. And for the pull down waterfall, I'm going to need 5 pieces that are 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. I'm going to need 1 piece that is 6 1/4 by 5 3/4. I'm going to need 1 piece that is 8 1/2 by 6 1/4. And another piece that's 1 1/4 by 11. And this is just a cutoff piece and it's bigger than 1 1/4. So I'm going to trim this down to 1 1/4 by 11. And because it's hard for me to cut a piece that's that narrow, 1 1/4 on my large trimmer, and sometimes I get things crooked, I'm going to wait to trim this down until after I've made the folds. And then I can cut it with the folds on my small little We Are Memory Keepers guillotine, and I'll have a more exact cut. I'll show you what I mean when I get to that part. But to begin with, we're going to start with our piece that measures 8 1/2 by 6 1/4. And we are going to score every 3/8 of an inch. We're going to make 5 score marks that are 3/8 of an inch apart. And so those are going to be, let me look at my measurements here. It's going to be 3/8, 3/4, 1 1/8, 1 1/2, and 1 7/8. And I don't really even worry about the numbers on it so much. I tend to come to my scoreboard and I just count over 1, 2, 3, score, 1, 2, 3, score, just like that until I get 5 of them. So I've got my first 3/8, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to score at 3/4 of an inch. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to score at 1 1/8. 1, 2, 3, 1 1/2. That's 4. And 1, 2, 3, 1 7/8. And those are the 5 score marks that I'm going to make. And those are the placement for our 5 pieces that make up the waterfall, right? So now we're going to fold and burnish all of those score marks. And now that we've folded and burnished all of those, it's time for us to go ahead and start attaching our pieces here to the waterfall mechanism. And how we're going to do that is we're simply going to apply some glue on in between these score marks here. So I've scored every 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to apply glue on this portion here, this 3/8 of an inch portion, but I'm not going to come into the fold. I'm going to stop just shy of the fold because I don't want any glue on that fold area. Okay, so if you see here, I've applied the glue inside of that 3/8 of an inch area, but I didn't go up to that fold line. And then I'm going to take my my piece of cardstock, my 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch piece of cardstock, and I'm just going to go right up to that fold. And sometimes what I'll even do is I'll go ahead and fold it on that fold line so I can scooch it up to there, but I'm not going beyond it any. You know what I mean? So I'm going to do that, spread it out, and that one's in place. And now I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to apply glue with inside of that 3/8 of an inch area in between each of the fold marks, being careful not to get the glue on the fold mark. You know, I don't want to be on the fold line. I'm just going to come up near it, if that makes sense. Take my second piece of paper, lay it on here. I'm making sure that my edges are lined up too. It looks like I've got to trim a little bit off of one of these, but I'm going to get them all in place first and then I can trim them. And then just to make sure that I'm all the way up to that fold mark, I'm going to go ahead and fold it back on itself. Making sure that I'm lined up, spread it out. And when I'm saying that I'm folding it back on itself, this is what I mean. So this one is the first one I attached down. Okay, and so I folded it back so that I could see that mark. This is the second one. As I fold it back, I can see that I'm lined up right at the very top. So I've got my piece lined up with the top of the fold when it is folded. I hope that makes sense. So let's move on to the next one. We're going to apply our glue within that 3/8 of an inch area. Just like this. And these can be spaced out, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch. I've even seen 1/4 of an inch. I don't personally like 1/4 of an inch because you've got to have some room between them to be able to fit a picture on here. You know, if you're going to actually use it to put pictures on it, you've got to have some room in between there to be able to do that. So I don't like that. 1/2 inch is fine. I almost prefer the 1/2 inch. But on this one, I was trying to space out so I could get 5 of these sort of photo flaps in place and still have, I feel like one of these is too long. Is this one not the right size? So I could get 5 of them in place without, yeah, it's a little long. I'm going to have to trim that one off. Within the size that I needed. So I found out that, you know, 3/8 of an inch was going to be the right size. I was going to be able to line up 5 of them. If I did 1/2 inch, I was only going to be able to do 4, and I wanted to be able to do 5. So that's why I chose to do 3/8 of an inch. But like I said, you can space them out however you want. There's no real rule on how you do that. But I would want to caution you to take into consideration, what are you putting on each of these pages? Because if you're going to put pattern paper and then a picture on top of it, in my experience, you need a little bit more room between the pages to be able to accommodate for that. So let's put the next one down. I should have double checked the cutting on these. I didn't. I cut these with my big cutter, and sometimes it's not as accurate as my little one. And I'm seeing that now. I mean, I knew it, but I wasn't paying attention. So, so I'm going to fold it back, and then that way I can make sure that it's all the way up to the fold. I want it to be up to the fold. That's what's going to give me a straight reveal down there. And then the last one, putting our glue in the 3/8 of an inch area here. Careful not to go over onto the fold. Got a little bit up there. Take our next piece, line it up. These need to be trimmed. It's okay. I'll show you how we'll trim it when we're done, and then that way it'll be all straight to each other, which is a good thing, right? All right, there we go. So now that we've got these in place, I'm actually going to take my trimmer over here, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a haircut. And this is going to take a lot of force, so here we go. Watch. Okay, that was a lot, I know, but look, it works and it's perfectly straight. It just takes a little bit of elbow grease. I mean, you've got to kind of whack it over and over again because you've got a lot of layers that you're going through, but it totally works, you know? There we go. Now I've got a perfectly straight edge with all my pieces. I do need to trim some off of this one because for whatever reason, it's not the right size. It looks like I might have a few of them. I'm going to double check those. I'll be right back. All right, I had to trim up that one, but we're doing good now. It's looking pretty good. So as you can see, I've got all my pages here lined up, all my pieces lined up here on my page, and they are all attached to the back of this to this portion where we've made all of the score marks and we've folded it. And it's basically, you know, acting kind of like a roll top desk at this point. This is how we're going to work this out. So the next step is going to be to trim off the bottom so that it's, you know, not as long as it is. Right now it's too long, and I cut it long on purpose because I want to use this die to cut a nice little, you know, handle loop. I want something I can grab a hold of on this. So from the fold, I'm going to measure down to 6 1/4 inches, and that's going to be the area that I don't want the, that I'm going to want to line this up with, this die with. So I'm going to find my center here, and I'm going to mark my center. Okay, so now I'm going to mark the center of my die here, the center of this circle, because I want to make sure that I'm lining those up. I want that little loop thing to show up in the center of my pull tab, right? Die cutter. I'm going to set this in here. I'm going to line it up so that the center line is lined up with the mark here. And I want to make sure that I'm not going beyond that other tick mark that I made at 6 1/4 inches, so that it doesn't fall below the area that I need it to be in. And once I've got that in place, then I'm going to take my tape, I'm going to run over it, and we're going to run this through the die cut machine so that I can cut that out. Now it's not going to cut it edge to edge. We're going to have to come back over it here in just a minute with my X-Acto blade. There we go. So now that we've made our cut, and see how we've got this little loop here. Looks like I've got some stuff here from the tape. I need to clean it off. Let's take this off. So that was the piece that we cut off there. And now we're just going to line this up so that we can square it off. I'm going to line it up there, make sure that I'm straight. It looks like I'm off a little bit. I might be a little bit crooked, but that's okay. We're going to straighten it out here with our next cut. Clean that off. And if I'm lined up correctly, all along there, all along here, just trying to make sure that I'm squared up. Okay, so that's good. So I'm going to line those up, and then I'm going to just take my X-Acto blade and I'm going to draw it back down to that half circle that I just cut out. And then I'm going to start at the half circle and draw it back down again. And that's going to just straighten out any little, you know, I might have been just slightly crooked. Taking those little bits off there, we're going to straighten it out. And now we are good to go. And we've got a nice little pull tab cut out here for us. And everything is lining up really straight and true. And I'm very happy with the way this looks. Okay, so now the next step is we're going to have to create some sort of a wraparound piece that's going to hold this bottom piece stationary. Because if we're going to pull and make this happen, we've got to have one of the pieces has to be fixed. They can't all just go with it, otherwise it'll just slip right out. So this bottom piece is the one that we're going to fix as a stationary piece. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take like kind of the thickest part of this whole unit here, and I'm going to hold my long, you know, I've got this 11-inch long piece, and I'm going to hold it around there, and I'm going to very loosely fold it around. I'm not going too tight. In fact, I might even push this back some so that I can get a little bit of a give here I don't want it to be super, super tight, because as we're starting to add photos and things to it, I still want this to be able to move as the waterfall and not get caught. I hope that makes sense. So now that I folded this and it's, you know, sort of creating almost a belly band of sorts around this, I'm going to slip it off, and now I'm going to give it one more little quick burnishing here on these fold marks. And let's see, what does this measure out to be, because I might as well take a measurement of it. The folded piece is, okay, I'm an 1/8 of an inch beyond. So my width on this is 6 1/4, and this is now 6 3/8. So that's, you know, that's going to be just enough room for it to kind of function in there like that. And now I'm going to take this over to my trimmer, and I'm going to cut this down to 1 1/4 inches. And this way my cut will be more true to size on this one. And I don't want it to be wider than that. 1 1/4 inches is pretty much the right size. When it gets to be wider than that, it's not going to function correctly. And let me show you why. So this whole piece here sort of floats away. Can you guys see how this like floats away? When it's being pulled down, let's look at it from the side. When it's being pulled down, it has to have enough room. Look at this. It has to have enough room for it to really pull away. So I've got to have space in there. And that's fine up at the top, but let's go down a little bit lower. It's hard to do this and do it in the camera at the same time. But watch as it keeps coming down. That space gets bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? So if the connection piece that's down here, that's this piece right here. Do you see that? If that connection piece is any taller, it's going to hold this down and restrict its ability to move in and out. I hope that makes sense. So we want to make sure that we've got it as thin as possible, but still big enough to, you know, give it some sort of structural grab to it, right? And the way I've found to do that is because when I do this thin piece like this, I'm always a little bit concerned, is that enough to really hold it in place? So what I do is I add a backing piece to it. And that's this piece here that measures 6 1/4 by 5 3/4. And what it's going to do is it's going to fit just in the back here, right? And that is what we're going to wrap this around. This is going to get glued to the back here, and then the entire back is going to get glued down. So I don't think I explained that very well. Let me go over it again real quickly. So the bottom of this band is going to line up. So we're going to, here, this is what we're going to do. We're going to lift the whole piece up from the main fold. So we've got all these pieces, we're going to lift it up. We're going to place this on here and wrap it around, okay? Just like that. When we bring it back down, I want the bottom of this band to line up with the the third one up, okay? So this third one here, maybe let's get a piece of contrast paper here to go underneath it. So I'm going to line up the edge of this here, the bottom of this band right here is going to be lined up flush with the bottom of this 1, 2, third one, okay? And for those of you that want an exact measurement, let me see if I can't measure that for you. Get that lined up, and I'm centering it left to right. So I've got the piece centered left to right. So I've got a little bit overhanging on each side, an even amount, and the bottom is lined up with the bottom of this 1, 2, 3, the third flap here, okay? And that's just giving me some spacing. And then I'm going to turn it all over, okay? I place this piece on the back. Oops, I just wiggled the whole thing out of place. All right, we're going to try this again. Looks like I need to trim this piece down a little bit too. Let me go ahead and make a mark on that, trim it, and then we'll do that. Looks like there to there. I think when I trimmed all that down, I got a little bit out of whack. And that's okay. That's, you know, we just keep making it work, right? Okay, so now that's going to work. So I've got my attachment piece on the back. I've slipped it around there. I'm going to slide this. Now, look, this is all the way underneath all of them. So this is how this is. Let's look at it one more time. I've got this attachment piece on the back. It's floating around. I'm not gluing it down to anything at all. It's just sitting back there. I've got my little belly band piece that I've wrapped around, and I'm sticking it over this bottom piece with the pull down tab, and it's wrapping around the back to that attachment piece that I'm just holding into place. Okay, and I'm not even worried if that's in the right place yet. I'll deal with that in a minute. Okay, and then I'm going to fold this forward, and I'm going to line the bottom of my little belly band attachment, whatever you want to call it, with the bottom of the third little photo flip thing. What do you call these little pieces of the waterfall? I don't even know. So I'm lining it up with that, and that's all looking really good. I like it. I think it's great. And let's measure that while I've got it in place. It looks like it is from the bottom. It's 1 inch from the bottom. Okay. And so then with the top, it's going to be 2 1/4 inches, right? Because it's a 1 1/4 inch piece. So it's 1 inch from the bottom. But I like referencing, you know, the edges of these, because sometimes that bottom piece might have been cut a little bit thinner or something, and you just never know. Okay, so once I've got it exactly where I want it to be, I'm going to turn it over. Okay. Press it down so that none of that is moving anymore. I can adjust this little back piece without moving anything else. And then I'm going to glue these onto the back piece. So don't go all the way to the fold, because remember, we've kept a little room there. I just said don't go all the way to the fold, and then I practically did. Let me wipe some of that off. Okay. Because we don't want that to glue to anything else. We just want it to glue to the back. I'm going to fold this over and give it a little pressing. Just very light little pressing. I'm going to get the other side here. Glue it down. And see, now what I've done is I'm carrying the load. So the entire thing isn't just being attached by this one piece. The entire thing is being attached by this entire piece here, right? So for me, that's just been a way that it works out. So now that I've got that in the right placement, I'm going to line it up again with the bottom of my, the bottom of this third piece. And once that's lined up and centered the way I want it to be, set it down, and I'm going to lift up this whole section, right? And I'm going to put glue all over the back of this. Not all the way to the edge, just a little bit from the edge. But I'm going to put glue all on the back of this piece. We're going to flap it, you know, flip it back down. And that's going to attach to that bottom piece there. And that's what's going to create our fixed aspect and allow it to work as a pull down waterfall. Whoops. Let's straighten this out. I wiggled it. There. Well, look, I wiggled it back into place, so that's okay. There we go. Pressing it all down. I'll lift it back up just to make sure we're fixed only on that spot. So I want to be able to slide this, right? That's doing pretty good. Spreading the glue out. There we go. Now, if we go to pull it, it's going to do just what it's supposed to do. And it's going to work just the way it's supposed to work. Isn't that great? I'm super happy with it. And I've got a large area, a large surface area to glue it down onto my page. So I'm not worried about, you know, it pulling away or anything like that. Looks like I've got a little bit I need to trim off there. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and attach it down to our book. Just like this one, we're just gluing it directly down onto the book like that. So let me grab glue and we're working on. Set this aside. And see, you're not even gonna know that I cut out that huge section there, right? I mean, this is all just gonna get covered up, but it gives us a continuity of design to know that that's sort of behind there, and your mind basically assumes that it's back there. Making sure everything's gonna work fine. It looks great. Oh, I just realized I rounded the corners on the other one. Let me round these corners before I glue it down. It's going to be a pain to do it like this anyway, but it'll be easier to do it now than when it's all glued into the book. Okay, so now I'm going to apply the glue to the back side of everything, and we're just going to go ahead and glue it down. I think that that's going to be great. So let's slather up the back. Now make sure you don't get any glue on this piece. It's only on this back attachment piece. That's the only place that we're wanting to put glue at all. Everything else has to be able to move. So this is our fixed spot. And you guys might be able to hear fireworks. We live in a neighborhood. We live in a part of the city that it's not legal, but we live far enough out. I mean, we're a stone's throw from the county line. So people just do it, right? So the sun has now gone down, so we've got some people that are playing with fireworks, and it's probably going to be something that we hear more of in increasing amounts up until the 4th, and even after the 4th. I'm pretty sure we'll hear some then. So, yeah, you know, this is how this works. Okay, so now we've got glue all over the back here. Make sure I'm still good. And I'm just going to place it pretty close to the top. Oh, not like that. With an even reveal all around, making sure that my edges aren't going beyond where they need to be. This needs to scooch up just a little bit. That's good. I'm happy with that. And see, now that's how it's going to fit inside of here. If I had done my gussets any bigger, I wouldn't have been able to do 5. I would have had to stop at 4. But because I was able to do those 3/8 of an inch gussets, I was able to make that work. And you can sort of lift this up and burnish that attachment piece down a little bit more. And it's not necessary. I've made a lot of waterfalls where I didn't have that attachment piece on. But I started doing this a couple, I don't know, like a year ago, and I like it. I think it works really well. So now if we give it a pull, everything works. Isn't that nice? I'm super happy with it. So let's go ahead and put some paper on this. We're in the home stretch, people. We are almost done. We're getting there. Let's get some pattern paper to put down on here. I need to trim this one down here. I'm going to make my little tick mark here to trim down the width first, and then we'll start with that. Trim that down. And then from this top piece, I know that that's 4 1/4 inches, so I'm going to cut it at 4 1/8. Let's see how we are on that. Yep, that fits on there nicely. And then I'm going to cut these. I could get 4 of them out of there every 3/8 of an inch, I think. Yep, I could get 4 of them on there. We just won't have it for the bottom one, but I still think that would look really nice. It's going to be really hard for me to do 3/8 of an inch on here, but I'm going to try. So 1, 2, 3. That's going to be at 1 1/8 inches. Okay, so that will be the top one. And then 3/8. This last cut's the one that's going to be hard. And I think what I'm going to do on that is I'm just going to mark it. Mark it at 3/8 of an inch on either side, using the one I just cut as a guide. Okay. And then I'm actually going to take a piece of tape along one end. And I'm going to line it up in my trimmer with each of those tick marks lining up on the cutting edge. That way it's not gonna move on me as I'm making the cut. And so I'll go ahead and cut that down. And then I just have to lift off the tape. There we go. That works. Sometimes you just got to use some tape. Let's see. How does this pattern line up? Not like that. Like this. Like that. And like that. There we go. So now let's cut some 1/4 inch edges on these. And that's also going to be challenging because the way my corner chomper works, I have to kind of lay it in there. I can't really push up against the edge because it'll just slip in. So I'm going to be really careful when I do these. If you guys have a different style of corner chomper, you might have an easier time of it. But this is how I'm going to do it. All right, so now we've got those. Let's go ahead and round the corners on these. We are in the full on home stretch here, people. Home stretch. Let's get these done. And then let's ink all of our edges. I think it just gives it such a nice finished look. I may not necessarily notice when I do it, but I notice when I don't do it, if that makes sense. And so I'd rather just do it and not see that. Okay, I've inked all my edges. Let's glue them down. All right, we have all of our paper on. We have a working pull down waterfall. I'm super happy about it. I think it looks super, super, super cute. It is just, yeah, it's everything I wanted it to be. Okay, so the next step is going to be I need to go ahead and add a grommet for the pull down here. I think we're going to go for one of the bigger eyelets. As far as colors in here, you know, I don't know. I don't have a gold tone one, so that's not going to work. And I feel like the blues and the greens and even the grays just aren't going to work. So I think we're going to go with white. I'm going to pull out one for the pull down waterfall, and then I'm going to pull out 3 others for our tags because we still need to do those too. And then I'm going to need my punch tool, my crimping tool here. I'm going to need 4 of these washers. We got 4, oh, that's 5. There we go, 4 of them. Put these away before I lose them. I think, did I lose? They're really small and they kind of go everywhere. All right, these are the tools we're gonna need. Let's go ahead and pull it down as far as it can go. Grab one of these inexpensive cutting mats that you can get from the Dollar Tree, but they're small and I can slide it underneath here. So when I go to do my my punching, then I'm punching in a way that's not going to interfere with anything. One thing I want to check for before I go ahead and punch though is I want to make sure that I've got plenty of room for it. It looks like I can put it, center it like about here. That looks like it would be a good place. Maybe there. So let's pull it down. I'm gonna kind of try to see inside of this. There is, if you can see on here on this punch tool, there's a little cutout. So I'm trying to look down in there into the hole. And so I can see where I'm placing it. And then I'm gonna grab my hammer, which, all right, let's try this again. I'm gonna put my punch over the spot that I want it to be in. And then I'm gonna give it like 3 good taps. And that's gonna cut that out. I'm gonna go ahead and use my little pokey tool to push the hole that I punched out of the paper out of there. Put this back away, we're done with it. And then I'm gonna take one of the grommets and one of the washers. And I'm gonna put the, pretty side up. And this whole thing is gonna have to get flipped over. Yeah, you guys will do this before you put it in your book, right? Or not. I mean, this works, right? It does. Let's be honest, it works. And then the washer goes curved side up. So there's a curved side and then there's a kind of a rough side, and it goes curved side up. And we're gonna put this on top and I give it like 7 taps. And for some reason, 7 just seems to be the number that works for me. So you'll have to see, you know, with your force of your tap and whatever you use, what works for you. But the 7 works for me. And yeah, that's going to line up perfectly. I'm actually really happy with the placement on that, on where that is and how that lays down there. I think that looks really good. So that is done. Now let's go ahead and put some paper covering on our tags so we can punch those holes and put the grommets in them as well. Okay, I found some scraps and I'm going to go ahead and use my die cutter to cut out the matting pieces, and I'm going to do it the same way I did for the tags, where I'm not going to cut it all the way down. So let's get the matting die. And I really do use these all the time, you guys. It's my favorite, one of my favorite die sets. Get it out. Made a mess in here. All right, so I'm going to place this on here, and I want to be able to cut it down longer, right? But I think I want to have this little seashell over here in the corner. So I'm going to sort of scooch it over to the side, place it on here. I'm going to get my tape, hold it in place, and I'm going to cut it about 3/4 of the way down, and then we'll finish the rest of it with our paper trimmer, right? So cut it down. Take this off. Okay, so I'm going to cut the other two in the same way as I did this one, and in the same way as before when I was cutting the base of the tag. We've partially cut all of the matting pieces for our tags, and just like we did with the first one, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of trim off this top part on all of them, or at least as much of it as I feel like I can. I don't want to waste this other strip of paper, so I'm not going to cut it all the way over, but I'm going to trim it up like this. Okay, I'm going to grab my paper trimmer, and just like I did with the other ones, I'm going to use my fingers as a stop here along the cutting edge so that I know that I'm doing it in 2 points so that I know that my angle is straight here. And I'm just going to cut that straight down to continue following the line, okay? And this time, the shoulder before needed to be at 5/8 of an inch. And this time I'm going to leave it at 1/2 an inch, which in this case, I'm cutting it pretty close, but that's going to be just fine. So I'll line up this one here, give that a quick cut, and there we go. And now let's grab one of the tags and test it, make sure that we're right. Let me see here. Yep, that's looking really good. I like the reveal on all of that. I'm going to go ahead and round the corners on them also. So I'm going to trim the rest of these up and I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and finished trimming them to size. I rounded the corners, inked the edges, and glued them down, and I think our tags look super cute. Now let's go ahead and punch our holes. And to do that, I need to find the center. Let me see, let's look at it this way. So that's going to be somewhere around in here. It's going to be the center there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch one, and then I'm going to use that as a template to punch the rest of them so that they're all lined up the same. So if one of them's crooked, they're all going to be crooked, but it's going to be just fine, right? I'm going to give it 4 taps this time because I've got another layer of paper on there. And that's going to come right out. Push out my little paper hole. And now I'm going to use this as a template for the others. So I'm going to stack them up just like this. I'm going to place my my hole punch in there, and I'm just going to give it 1 tap, and that's going to mark a ridge. And if you see, like it's going to like snuggle in there. It's not going to move anywhere else. So now I'm going to tap this 4 times. Pull that one out. Take my original one as a template again, line it up, give it 1 tap. Now I can kind of find the ridge there that I've created. I'm going to give it 4 taps. And now I've got my holes punched for all of them. So now we're just going to go through and add our grommets the same way we did on the other one. We're going to put the pretty side on the front, right? Place that face down on our little setting tool. Then I'm going to put my washer curved side up, or the rounded side up, just like that. I'm going to take my other part of the setting tool, place it on, and I'm going to give it 7 taps. And that one's perfect. And do the same thing with the other 2. And now let's go ahead and cut some ribbon for our tags, and then also for down here. I think on this one down here, I'm just going to have a kind of a tie going sideways and see if that will work. I don't want it to hang out too far down the bottom, but we'll just see what happens here, right? Let's do 24. We'll have 6-inch pieces on all of them, and I think that that will work out well. I always just cut the full length of all the pieces that I need, and then I just start folding them in half and making, you know, subsequent cuts. You guys do it however whatever works for you guys. So I'm going to use these 3 for the tags, and this one for down here. Let's pull it out so we can work with it. There we go. Yeah, I'm just going to tie it. I think that that's going to work out just fine. And then we're going to kind of let it go out to the side here. So let's cut some little pretty angles on it. Just like that. And I'm going to take one of my lighters, and when I do this, the flame doesn't touch it. It just gets close enough to it that it causes it to melt. It doesn't actually touch the ribbon at all. The flame just gets near it, and then it causes, you'll see it start to almost roll itself back, and that's how you know you're in the right spot. So there we go. Oh my goodness, that worked out perfectly. I'm really happy with that. Okay, so now let's move on to putting ribbons in our tags. And how I do that is I'm gonna fold it in half and create a loop, okay? So here's the half, here's the loop. And I'm gonna fold that in half this way. And then I'm gonna press it through, kind of feed it through this grommet from the front side. If you feed it from the front side, then the loop will then come around to be in the front, and it's kind of pretty. And we're going to take the 2 tails, we're going to feed them back through that same loop that we went through and pull it tight. And that's going to give us, you know, our nice little ribbon topper here on our tag. Now, what I like to do is add a little bit of glue on here too. And that's just going to make sure that we, that it's not going to come undone over time. And how I do that is I'm just going to slide it to the side. I'm going to take the tip of my glue bottle and I'm going to go underneath it on the front and underneath it on the back, underneath the ribbon. And then when I bring it back forward, I'm going to lift up the front of the loop and put a little dab of glue there too. And then when I tighten it, you know, I go ahead and pull on my my tails here that have come through, then it's going to set. Now, if it's something I'm concerned about, I'll grab a clip and just let it sit on there for a minute just to hold it in place. I'm not really concerned about this one. I think it's going to be fine. It's not really going anywhere. But let's go ahead and cut our tails. Let's give them kind of a nice little angle cut here on both sides. There we go. And then again, let me show you how I do this. Okay, so you're going to take the flame and you're going to hold it, and I'm not actually touching the ribbon. I'm just getting close enough to it that it causes it to sort of pull back. See how there's space between the flame and the ribbon? And so that's just giving me that finish. I don't know if that was in focus. Let me try that one more time. Let's see, is that going to work? Okay, so I've got the flame. I'm not touching it. I'm just getting it near. the ribbon. There's that one. Let me do the other two and I'll be right back. We now have our tags all completed and they're looking super cute. So let's go ahead and put them in our pages here. So now I've got our tags in. We've got our book is basically done. I'm going to make a couple photo mats to tuck in here and then we're completely finished. Okay, that concludes the first of 4 album tutorials that I'm going to be making for you. And we have now concluded the 6.5 by 6.5 tutorial, and I think it turned out super cute. All it's missing right now are beach photos. So I'm going to have to get on a beach vacation here pretty quick. I think it turned out amazing. So we're going to go ahead and open the tie closure. Let's do a quick walkthrough. We've got on the inside front cover, we've got our little twist and pop up here. And then we've got our 2 faux pages on page 1. So it gives the illusion of having 3 pages already. Pages 2 and 3 have this really fun little flip out. Really happy with that. Page 4 just simply flips up and then down, just like that. Page 5, we've got those 2 additional sort of faux pages. Lots of room here for photos. And then on the back, I went ahead and created a couple little photo mats, little envelopes, or not envelopes. It's getting late. I'm sorry. Little cards, little photo cards or something. I don't know. I put some stuff in the pocket. That's what we're gonna say. And then I've got the pull down waterfall, and I'm super happy with how this works. I mean, it moves like butter, so I'm really happy with that. And then we went ahead and created our 3 tags that all stay in here, and I think that they came out really well. Let's go ahead and take them out so we can look at them. And that's it, folks. That is our 6.5 by 6.5 mini album, the first of 4 tutorials that I'm going to be posting every Thursday so that we can make all 4 of those album sizes that we were able to cut from the 2 sheets of chipboard. Now, I will say this as far as the paper that I've used so far. I'm gonna try to push myself and see if I can make all of these out of a single paper pad. Now, I've already made 2 of this one out of that paper pad. If I can make 2 of each of them out of there, that's going to be absolutely insane. But I'm surprised by how much paper I have left. So I can't tell you how much paper I'm using yet. I want to see what it's going to take over the course of it, but I will try to give you guys an update at the end of making all 4 of the tutorials so that you know, how much paper can I plan on using for these and how much can I get out of them. I think it's been really fun. All right. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, y'all. I really enjoy making these videos and the tutorials and posting them and getting to know all of you and visiting with you. This is a real blessing for me, and I'm so grateful that I get to do it and that any of you are even at all remotely interested in it. That's just such a bonus, and I'm so grateful for that. I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope that you are being kind to yourselves, and I hope you're finding joy in your journey. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great one. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.